So we're live? Okay, well, welcome everyone. This is an extraordinary event, technologically, but also conceptually. And I'd like to start by acknowledging that we're on unceded Coast Salish territory, as well as on unceded Coast Salish airwaves, internet and otherwise. I appreciate everyone's patience in helping us get up and rolling with this. And John will be following me with some comments on the overall structure of this. But for now, I want to just speak briefly on what's in store for this webinar. It's a really intriguing idea, and I think it is indicative of the kind of forward thinking that we are well known for, although sometimes there are bottlenecks and hoops and other things that we've got to work our way through. But by way of reference, I want to start with one of my favorite paintings by Paul Gauguin. And the three questions that he raises here are, I think, indicative of what IPinCH has been all about and where we are. But what this webinar is not about is where do we come from and what are we. This is something that we have certainly addressed in a variety of other contexts. And today is not about a retrospective. Today is not about reflecting on what we've done, sometimes done really well and sometimes less well. It's not about the lessons that we've learned. It's not about beating ourselves up about lost opportunities or things that did not go as well as we hoped. But today is all about a prospective, not a retrospective, and that is, where are we going? And this is a vital question. It's one that we have been pondering for some time, but it's a kind of question that we can't address without everyone in the IPinCH family, near and far, providing ideas and energy and otherwise helping us to figure out what's next once IPinCH formally winds down in a number of months at this point. And many of the activities, many of the initiatives that we have launched over the years have played out with sometimes remarkable benefits to communities, to the researchers involved, and to the public. But we also have a number of other initiatives that are current, that are continuing, in addition to the ideas that all of you are going to be presenting on and listening to this afternoon. And I just want to briefly mention several of these ongoing kinds of initiatives. And one is, and this is perhaps amongst the most common thing that comes across my phone or internet, is requests for information. And just to give you two examples of how diverse sometimes these requests are, last week I met with the Chinese State Ethnic Affairs Commission delegation who was visiting SFU primarily for information on First Nations. I was asked to give a presentation on IPinCH, and the almost hour and 20-minute question period was focused on questions that they had about what we're doing and the kinds of issues that we've been addressing. So there's a great need that this delegation has for dealing with the 59 different ethnic groups in China. Likewise, the week before, I was presenting to the Canadian Babyware Summit. These are product developers and consumers who have some really serious and important questions about appropriation of cultural heritage. Another ongoing initiative is what we have been contributing to the ongoing dialogue about the protection of sacred sites, about ceremonial burial grounds in British Columbia and elsewhere. The declaration that was penned by IPinCH members last year and has been making the rounds this present year has had a great impact on First Nations and I think on policymakers throughout the province. And one indication of how this has to be and will be a continuing initiative is that last week in Sumas, BC, First Nations leadership got together in a very important show of solidarity to force the province to live up to its responsibilities for protecting Lightning Rock, a transformation site, one that's also associated with ancestral burial grounds. In response to efforts by Dave Sheppy and others that we have just received some really important endorsements from First Nations leadership. And of course, what we've been doing with DNA and indigeneity, this is also pushing us towards addressing some of the ongoing and very important needs that communities and others have. But there's a lot more, obviously, that we're not going to talk about except from what is being presented here. And just to wrap this up, so there are three also very important questions that we're dealing with in terms of what IPinCH has been up to as we seek to make research involving Indigenous peoples and their heritage and other people's heritage more effective and more respectful and responsible. Now, all of this is, of course, just the tip of the iceberg in terms of Indigenous heritage needs, and the presentations that follow are going to be addressing many of these upcoming initiatives and great ideas that are going to flow from conversations like this today and in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, George. The existing schedule and hold folks to the 5-minute commitments. It's going to obviously take some time to do transitions between presentations because there's going to be some inevitable, well, transaction costs. Don't know how else to phrase it. So what this gathering is also intended to do, other than to hold to the forward-looking perspective that George has mentioned, which is doesn't always come naturally to archaeologists, but certainly does come naturally to the IPinCH team because of a constant effort to improve upon the historical treatment of the topics that we're the most interested in, and constant effort to improve upon ourselves in the way that we engage with one another and with the topics and issues at hand. With that in mind, everybody that is participating and everybody else in the IPinCH team is invited to refine their presentations into a brief statement associated that can be used in the final section of the IPinCH newsletter. So that's really where part of the place that this came from, is an interest in having folks look beyond the history of the project towards what would be in place as another legacy of the project, and with an emphasis on what will be carried forward, what will be the heritage of the Intellectual Property and Cultural Heritage Project. So, with that, what I'm going to try to do is make the transition to the presentation that Kelly Bannister was going to give. Kelly, I'm not sure whether or not it's possible for you to identify yourself with the new system that you have, but if you can do that, then please try so that we know whether or not you're available to give your presentation. If not, we'll take a few minutes, I'll try to locate it, and we'll give it.
All righty, see how I can do in 5 minutes. Thanks, everybody. My goal is just to try to highlight a few contributions related to Canadian research ethics policy. And to do that, I just want to touch on a conference that the IPinCH project organized and hosted back in February. And it was called the Working Better Together Conference on Indigenous Research Methods. And this was held in Vancouver and attended by about 80 participants who were what we saw as top Canadian scholars, educators, practitioners, policymakers, and administrators, and many others who really work in the area of research ethics. People came from many backgrounds for a couple of days of exchanging not just what it means to follow our national research ethics policy, the Tri-Council statement on research involving humans, but what does it mean and what does it really take to work collaboratively in research, in Indigenous research? And so we planned this conference to be different, and it was. And the purpose was really to explore more deeply a concept called ethical space that was introduced to Canadian research ethics by a Cree philosopher and educator, Willie Ermine, who many of you probably know. Willie and Marlene Brandt Castellano, another really important Indigenous ethics scholar in Canada, were the keynote speakers at the conference. So we used all sorts of different methods, and one of them was a graphic artist to do these graphic recordings. And this is just an example of the recording of the opening and the keynotes. And I'm not going to say too much about the conference itself, except for the challenge that Willie gave us to do something, not just do something with ethical space, but to do something as we, not just as I, as we move forward, understanding what that means and what that space really offers in terms of opportunities to, I guess, go beyond just the codification of principles and practices of research ethics and really understand at the heart what it means to live in relation to one another and our natural world. So it was quite an interesting challenge, and there'll be proceedings coming out where you can learn more about what we learned. But two things I just wanted to highlight from the conference in the forward-looking spirit of this webinar, and that is many things came out, but one thing that was clear was that the people who attended really felt a heart connection, and it was quite profound for me, and it right from the beginning with President Andrew Petter's opening, and when one of the things he said was the longest journey is from the head to the heart, and he really recognized this, and as he made a commitment, he emphasized the commitment of SFU and then the need for us to be working as equals in mutuality. So that was pretty neat, and SFU has been very true to that. IPinCH has been doing quite a bit of work with the Research Ethics Office and other administrative offices in helping to capture and harness the lessons that we've learned in working across cultures and across institutions, and trying to put that into practice and make changes so it'll be better for others in the future. The other neat thing that came was in the opening, Victor Gurin of the Musqueam Nation, who did an opening for us, a territorial welcome, and a song. He shared his own traditional song. As we made the record, and including video record of the conference to share, there became another opportunity to try to do things a little differently. And so with the help of Kathy Bell and others, we were able to create this new copyright statement that was customized to offer an acknowledgement and protection to Victor's song that drew on both Canadian and Musqueam law. So that's kind of a neat opportunity that I think offers something for future for others who might want to draw on it as an example. And so there's lots of outcomes forthcoming, written proceedings, edited video series, Biblio, the conference website, and I think all of this in the forward-looking spirit is that we have intentions to further contribute to changing policy in the Canadian research ethics context, but also I think people who were able to come and be a part of that event left with connected hearts and hopefully changed minds and hearts about a few things that will help them carry them forward and carry our work forward in the future. So I'll just leave it there.
Wow, thank you so much, Kelly. I totally agree with your sense of everybody leaving with new perspectives and senses of possibility from that gathering. So, we have a couple of minutes for questions, and I'd like to remind the folks that are presenting that it's useful if you get a chance to bring your slides up or other visuals you're going to use in advance of your presentation. And also to those of you who are not in the Blue Jeans system, who are just listening in, that you are more than welcome to use the function on your screen to submit comments or questions. So if there are any comments or questions, and you can unmute yourself and have at it, or send in a comment or question. Oh, good.
Am I on still, John?
You are.
Well, if there's no comments or questions, I just, because I was rushing, I wanted to just say thanks to everybody. There was such a huge team effort in this conference, and it was rich and deep and very humbling. And a thank you to every person who was involved to make it possible.
I have a quick question. it's Claire here. Just how do you define mutuality? What are you thinking of there?
Well, that's Andrew Petter's words. So that was just a quote from him, Claire. So I don't really have a handy definition of mutuality, but I think what he intended was that we would be, his idea would be that this needs to be an endeavor that is mutually beneficial, mutually respectful, that we are walking forward in this path together as partners. And he says that from the context of president of the university. So that's sort of what my impression of what he intended, but I think that's a great question to explore for us to explore further, excuse me.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kelly. We're going to, and thank you, Claire, for breaking the seal on the questions. Much appreciated. We're going to move on to Aman Gebru, who is available, we hope. Aman, are you there?
Me?
There you go. Now we can hear you, Aman.
Perfect. All right. Should I just continue then?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thank you very much for the chance to present my research. This is an SJD dissertation, and I've presented it in several occasions, but not to the crowd that I think gathered here. So it's very interesting to get that perspective. I'll try to pack as much as I can in 5 minutes.
Aman, I'm just going to, sorry, Aman, I'm just going to interrupt you. And I think just because of the nature of your internet connection, I probably need to ask you to just speak a bit slower, if you could, please.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, and also, do you have slides that you wish to be showing, Aman? Did you have a presentation?
No, I don't.
Okay, fine.
Yes,
proceed. Thank you.
I don't have a slide.
Sorry to interrupt.
Hopefully people can follow me up. So there is a paper coming out in the Oxford Review of International Business and Trade Law that would speak more in detail about my research. So I'm hoping to just give a nutshell presentation about what I've been doing. So it's a legal paper. I'm a lawyer by training, so that's the approach I'm taking. But I do understand the need for multidisciplinary approach here. And so I'm going to talk about traditional knowledge protection, and by that I'm talking about this positive protection of the knowledge that is providing indigenous people and local communities with the capacity to decide what happens to their knowledge once it's shared to others, and things related to that. So I'm just going to make 3 main points here. The research focuses on traditional medicine knowledge, but the 3 points that I'm trying to make, I think, apply to other areas of traditional knowledge. And the first main point is I think the legal literature that I looked at focuses on discussions of human rights, on equity and distributive justice, and these approaches are effective in highlighting key concerns, and they are justified given the history of indigenous people and local communities. However, I think the literature is relatively weak in discussions around economic efficiency. There are some scholars who use this approach in analyzing the issue, but I think it doesn't stand out in the general discussion about traditional knowledge. And I understand the narrow perspective that economic efficiency discussions bring, but I believe we can convince new stakeholders in this general discussion about traditional knowledge protection by using an economic efficiency approach. So that's the research approach that I'm taking. So my research focuses on this economic efficiency issue related to traditional knowledge, and it seeks to answer the question, is there an economic efficiency rationale for the positive protection of traditional knowledge? And the answer is yes, and this dissertation is dedicated to outlining this rationale and what frameworks that we should adopt following this rationale. So the core of the problem, as I see it, is the alarming rate of loss of traditional knowledge. And what the reason I say core is I think that's a consensus builder. Every stakeholder involved in traditional knowledge, I think, agrees that there's an alarming rate of loss, and that shouldn't be a scenario that we should be having. So the dissertation takes this core problem and situates it in this literature. Knowledge as a global public good. Joseph Stiglitz and others who are economists have talked about knowledge being a global public good, what we should do about it. So my research takes traditional knowledge and the discussions about it and situates it in that. And so I come up with an economic efficiency argument for why we need to protect traditional knowledge. And the core of that argument is that since traditional knowledge is a public good, that is, once you share that knowledge, you don't have any control over what happens to that knowledge. There's a disincentive that knowledge holders face, and that is a disincentive not to invest in documenting and disclosing that knowledge, even if you wanted to, because you don't have any power to regulate it after it's disclosed. So that's the core point that I tried to make. That's the second core point. And the third core point I want to make is, okay, then if we agree there's an economic reason for why we need to protect traditional knowledge, then what kind of framework does this rationale then justify us in coming up with? And so the results or the conclusion I arrived at is that we need a traditional knowledge database. And I know some of the works that I've seen of IPinCH fellows relates to the traditional knowledge database, related to labeling. So I try to provide the features that this database should provide. And basically, I mean, this is a database that could, that has to reflect the needs and expectations of every local community. So it will definitely be different. But some of the things that I think we should note is the possibility of communal ownership of the knowledge, standards such as prior informed consent, clearly outlining the scope of the knowledge so that there wouldn't be any disputes related to ownership there, and issues that deal with knowledge that's widely diffused. There could be a whole host of issues if a knowledge is widely diffused, and ownership would be hard to put there. And lastly, there should be a special space made for sacred knowledge. So not every knowledge needs to be protected, and therefore at least publicly disclosed. So there should be a database for sacred knowledge that could be only accessed by communities. So I think these are the things that the traditional knowledge database has to focus on. And then just to close off, my research talks about this international discussion. I think the most advanced discussion is happening at the World Intellectual Property Office. So I try to look at the current trends and future scenarios of how the international community would be addressing the protection of traditional knowledge. So I think these are, I mean, this is a nutshell presentation on my research. Just to close off with the spirit of the webinar, which is looking forward, I think the traditional knowledge database and traditional knowledge labeling initiatives, I think, have a lot of potential. So with that, I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Aman. The floor is open for comments or questions. I know, Aman, that we'll hear from you in a newsletter article, and that you can provide the address for your blog and other resources at that time. It might be useful, to be honest with you, Aman, there was a little bit trouble hearing you in the room, so it could be useful for you to just let us know what the next steps are in your research.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I hope you can hear me now.
We can hear you. It's just it's a percentage thing. We can hear about 80% of what you say, sort of no matter what. So I'm just pointing out that there may be some problems with comprehension that speak to the quality of the audio rather than the quality of the presentation itself.
Okay, thanks. So I guess going forward, what I'm looking at is the last part of the research that I'm looking at is the international discussions that are happening at the World Intellectual Property Office, and what on the international stage, what countries and communities that are concerned about the protection of traditional knowledge are doing. So what venues are they speaking at? What tools are they using on the international stage, and particularly legal tools that they are using? The other aspect of what I'm looking at going forward is the traditional knowledge database and how traditional knowledge labelings, there's different labeling initiatives that are being considered, how they interrelate with the legal tools and intellectual property tools that exist.
Terrific, Aman. Are there quick comments or questions from anybody? Nothing coming in. So, George has a comment.
Yeah, the question is,
He can't hear you.
resources.
I can hear that.
What kind of resources would really assist you with, the kind of work you're looking to do and you're currently doing now?
I think one of the things that I was really looking forward to is working with people in the field. So working with people that are working with communities that have first-hand experience of how can the law interface with the actual needs of communities in Canada, in the US, and other countries. So any IPinCH connections, any projects that I can link up with, I think that would be a great help.
Thanks very much, Aman.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you again, Aman. Very important work. So we're going to turn it over to Aaron Hogg here in the room, live and in person from the top of Burnaby Mountain.
Hi, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So I'm going to talk about the knowledge base. And for those who don't know me, I'm Erin. I'm a PhD student up here, and I'm also an IPinCH fellow and an RA. So let's get going. Oh, I'm drawing on the screen now. So for those, hopefully all of you know what the KB is and have used it, but for those of you who may have skipped that part of IPinCH, the IPinCH Knowledge Base is an online searchable repository and archive of materials related to intellectual property, issues in archaeology, and cultural heritage. The focal audiences for the KB are IPinCH team members and academic and community-based researchers interested in IP issues and cultural heritage. The KB began as an open-source, web-based content management system to highlight Julie Hollowell's findings on theoretical, practical, and critical issues emerging in IP and archaeology, a project which came out of a Killam Fellowship and a Wenner Gren Foundation grant. And as IPinCH came to be, the KB emerged as one of the three main components, the others including the community-based initiatives and the working groups. And resources within the KB were analyzed for themes, patterns, and relevance to the general IPinCH research questions. So the role of the KB is and was to store and provide research materials and thematic overviews in order to broaden and deepen analyses of the knowledge and findings flowing from the community-based initiatives. The KB facilitated comparisons of IP issues across cultural contexts and identifications of more or less successful approaches to IP issues in law, policy, and research. The KB hosts over 2,500 records, many of which can only be found within it, such as conference proceedings. And it's open to the public, but only registered IPinCH members have full access to all of the documents within it. So our desired futures for the KB post-IPinCH is envisioned as a bibliography, research tool, and storage retrieval port for documents, images, audio, and video materials compiled, created, and used throughout the IPinCH project. So with this in mind, Anika Lee-Scood, who was the KB administrator, went through the entire KB to look for open access documents within it. She determined that there were 50 completely open access documents and 197 documents with possible potential for open access, which I label as possible inclusions. So I went through all of these documents to determine what exactly they were and their potential post-IPinCH. So the open source documents were mainly bibliographies of material on the KB, as well as documents on cultural tourism initiatives and charters. The possible inclusions included conference proceedings, both published and unpublished, dissertations by IPinCH fellows mainly, documents including templates and examples of research agreements, conference papers, and PowerPoint presentations. The hope is that these documents can be posted in an archived KB made accessible to the public. So we hope to maintain two levels, the open access aspects of the KB post-IPinCH through two levels of access, open and private. We want to ensure that the valuable documents within the KB remain accessible to potential users, including researchers, communities, and students. And we hope to highlight IPinCH products, such as dissertations by IPinCH fellows and materials relevant to IPinCH. And with that in mind, thank you very much for listening. Any questions?
I've got a question, Erin.
Yeah.
One thing you didn't mention is how you're using the KB to feed material into the new Heritage Management Master's program that we're developing here.
I don't think we fully talked about that. I don't think we fully talked about that, but there's certainly good information within the KB. For those that you don't know, we're setting up a new online master's program for heritage resource management, starting next fall 2016. And we're compiling a bibliography of documents, research, applicable to that for students and professors within the program to use. So most likely a lot of documents within the KB can be used for that process.
I'm just checking to see if there's any other comments or questions that have been coming in. Nothing so far. Oh, wait.
Because we're still sharing.
No, there was a question.
I had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just going to read the question that somebody has logged in from outside here. And the question is, sorry if I missed it. Where will the KB be hosted once IPinCH ends? And the honest answer to that is that we're still working on it a little bit. We don't know whether it will be a standalone part of the SFU institutional repository or whether or not we will fold what the most valuable parts of the KB into the IPinCH website. Probably the latter. Probably it'll be part of the archived IPinCH website. So go ahead, Claire.
I was just wondering if there's any potential to, I suppose I feel a little alarmed by the phrase archive KB, and I just imagined that it would go on somehow.
Well, that would be terrific. And it's occurred to a few people to adopt it and take it on and try to, keep it vital and growing. But just as soon as that seemed like maybe that was the direction that it was going to go, that has seemed like, for whatever reason, that it wasn't something that the individuals wanted to take on. So we're looking for a home. And if anybody has ideas or aspirations associated with maintaining the knowledge base, then I think, I'm looking at George to see whether I'm speaking out of turn, but I think we'd be very interested in hearing proposals from interested individuals or organizations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, any other comments? Because I think otherwise we can make a transition to the next presenter, who's Kathy McCloskey. And we're actually a minute ahead of schedule at this time. So we'll let Kathy take a minute to get her presentation ready, and we'll be back with you shortly.
Hello?
Hi, Kathy.
Hello?
Now
Hi
we have
there.
you.
Hi there.
Terrific.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. Just before you get started, Kathy, you're just a little on the dark side on the visual bit, so I'm wondering whether or not there's a way to put some more light on your lovely face.
Well, I'm not sure exactly why this happened. I accidentally clicked and was removed from this presentation. And when I logged back on again or clicked back on again and got reconnected, I'm dark now.
Oh, dear.
So I'm not sure how to correct that.
Well, let me hit a couple of buttons. Let me hit a couple of buttons on my side and see whether or not anything matters.
Yeah. Because everything else reconnected perfectly, but I can't see myself. So the little rectangle here in the upper right hand.
How about moving your camera around just a little bit, Kathy?
My which?
Your
my camera?
Yeah, or the screen itself.
The screen, yeah.
That doesn't seem to me making any difference.
It's not. And actually, it's not that I have images. I will be speaking to notes from my notes.
There you go.
But I do have two things. Oh, is it clearing up now? Can you see me now?
We still see you. I think you're right that once you make the transition to the slides that it won't seem quite so dramatic.
They're not. Well, I don't have slides because, frankly, I don't want what I have to show you. I'll just show you briefly, but I don't want it up on the net. I don't want it part of a permanent.
See. Okay, very good. Very good.
Okay.
That sounds fine, Kathy.
Okay.
You should
all right,
proceed.
well, I'll go ahead and start.
There you go.
Well, thank you, George and John and all the participants. This is wonderful to be able to participate in this webinar. So my presentation today is Protesting Appropriation of Navajo Weavers' Designs. For decades, entrepreneurs have appropriated Navajo weavers' patterns by taking designs from exhibition catalogs and coffee table books authored by scholars, collectors, dealers, and traders. Currently, knockoffs of Navajo designs are woven in over 20 countries, including Peru, Pakistan, India, Turkey, and Mexico. And they are legally imported into the United States. As long as they are not labeled Indian-made, they do not violate the Indian Arts and Crafts Board Act, a Truth in Advertising Act that protects consumers, not producers. For nearly a century, regional warehouses were stuffed with authentic Navajo rugs. Today, they are crammed with knockoffs. This appropriation of cultural heritage affects an estimated 20,000 weavers, devastating the market for their rugs. There's no infrastructure to market their rugs since the trading post system has collapsed. Today, few weavers are able to make a sustainable living based upon their skill, when in an earlier era, their labor was the backbone of the Navajo economy. And that's the topic of my forthcoming book, Why the Navajo Blanket Became a Rug, Excavating the Lost Heritage of Globalization. 80% of the information is drawn from archival material untapped by other scholars. Well, the most recent egregious example of this ongoing appropriation of Navajo cultural heritage can be seen in the escalation of sales by Novica. Affiliated with National Geographic, Novica is the largest fair trade organization marketing on the internet. The for-profit company supports 75,000 artisans from 8 different regions in the world. Rather than noting that exact copies of Navajo designs are Navajo-inspired, Novica has recently renamed several of these designs as Maya creations, completely eradicating any association with Navajos. And that's what I want to show you right here. I don't know if you can see this.
Yeah.
No, not very. Can you see it?
Not bad.
All right. Well, okay, not too bad. All right. Well, all right. It's possible that Novica, in other words, they switched from actually admitting they were Navajo-inspired to calling them Maya creations. So it's possible Novica renamed the textiles due to the court case in which the Navajo Nation recently sued retailer Urban Outfitters for violating their trademark. And Solon Roth has actually alluded to this in her blog. So, fair trade organizations encourage producers to develop products based on their cultural traditions and promote their artistic talents in order to sustain cultural identity. By harnessing the symbolic capital of indigenous goods bearing well-known designs originated by another group, Novica's support for such appropriation exemplifies the tension between ethics and the marketplace. The company's actions violate a key plank in the fair trade platform: to provide equal employment to the most disadvantaged. Novica's support for such appropriation exerts an even greater threat to weavers because it neutralizes copying through the prism of ethical marketing. By sanctioning the production of knockoffs, Novica capitulates to, rather than counters, capitalism's mandate. I have a chapter titled Novica and Navajo Knockoffs in the Net, a critique of fair trade practices, published in Lyon and Moberg, their book Fair Trade and Social Justice, Global Ethnographies, that's SUNY University Press. On May 30th, 2015, over 80 people attending the Navajo Studies Conference hosted by Northern Arizona University signed my petition. I just showed you that image, protesting Novica's sales of Zapotec rugs bearing Navajo designs. Today, I'm going to describe the strategy I utilized to persuade Novica to discontinue such sales, which violates Articles 11, 20, and 31 of UNDRIP, stressing the rights of Indigenous peoples to maintain, control, protect, and develop their heritage, traditional knowledge, and expressions, including designs. I met Navajo activist Clee Benally at the conference, and we arranged to Skype. Clee has challenged antiquities dealers in France for auctioning Navajo sacred masks, and he's also clashed with the U.S. Forestry Service for issuing a permit to make artificial snow using wastewater on the San Francisco Peaks near Flagstaff, Arizona. And these mountains, of course, are sacred to local Native nations. Upon learning the particulars of the Novica appropriations, Clee mapped out a campaign which involved developing a website and a detailed strategy to stop the appropriation. Meanwhile, I participated in a colloquium on the commodification of American Indian arts hosted by the Fowler Museum at UCLA. 3 weeks before leaving for Los Angeles, I mailed a letter and 2 pertinent publications of mine and 1 page of the protest to Roberto Milk, the CEO of Novica, inviting him and the marketing director to the event, and I requested a meeting to present the entire petition the following day. Novica's international headquarters happened to be located very close to UCLA. Milk replied quickly after he received my packet, noting that the big problem wasn't caused by other native weavers. Instead, Chinese manufacturers were churning out massive numbers of rugs that were selling at big box stores. He also claimed that Zapotec believed their nomadic ancestors had intermingled with tribes from the southwest U.S., so the designs were spread in that manner. He requested proof of the age of the Navajo designs so that Novica would consider stopping ordering them from the Zapotec weavers after selling off their current inventory. So I immediately Xeroxed images with text taken primarily from coffee table books on historic weaving, noting that most of the designs that Novica was currently selling dated from the 3rd quarter of the 19th century. The Zapotec copies appeared during the 1980s, almost a century later, and were brokered by entrepreneurs located in Santa Fe and Taos, New Mexico, and Los Angeles. This appropriation has been well documented by anthropologists working in Oaxaca. I sent Milk several attachments, including the original Navajo designs, accompanied by images of knockoffs downloaded from their website over the past 10 years. The Zapotec woven rugs were exact copies of Navajo originals depicted in the coffee table books, and they were actually called Navajo. So nearly 3 weeks went by, and I had no response. The day before leaving, I emailed Milk after leaving an urgent message on his voicemail. I said that a Navajo activist who is also a web designer was ready to go forward with a poster to stop Novica exploitation. He finally replied, noting that Novica was willing to collaborate of their own volition. I thought that was a rather odd comment, given the company was fair trade. I phoned the Fair Trade Federation in the US and was told that Novica is not certified by them, nor by the International Fair Trade Organization located in Europe. Anybody can use that descriptor. After several more email exchanges in which I provided the stock numbers and the names of the Zapotec rugs, Novica has finally removed them from their website. We will continue to monitor their site and notify them if any new rug designs are Navajo-derived. I've also given this information to Navajo historian Dr. Jennifer Dinette-Dale, who serves on the Navajo Nation Human Rights Commission. This is a gratifying result, and I really think my IPinCH affiliation played a role in Novica taking this seriously. But this is just the beginning. I recently discovered that Pendleton has ramped up selling Zapotec woven Navajo designs on their website. There are at least a dozen rugs up to 8 by 10 feet, and the latter sell for thousands of dollars. This is absolutely devastating to Navajo weavers. Without an infrastructure, without cooperatives, they are truly becoming more and more impoverished by the day. So if you can see this picture, this is one image too that Novica used to sell this design too. Can you see that? That's a sacred design. That's a Yehi design. So were you able to hear all of that?
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
Fascinating presentation, Kathy, and it pains me to have to intervene to say that we're just about out of time. I just want to make sure in case anybody has a quick comment or question and that they have an opportunity to voice it.
Sure, I'm finished. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, Kathy,
any questions?
You should write a detective story about this. It's just amazing the work that you've done to try to run this down and keep things moving along. Anything? Anybody writing in with a comment? No. Good. So the next presenter, then. Thank you so much, Kathy. The next presenter is going to be Solène Roth.
Solène.
Yeah. I'm just trying to.
So many little challenges associated with this new world of video conferencing.
Solène.
We had you briefly.
It seems like I can do this. Okay. Can everybody see this or?
Looks good. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Hi everyone. Thanks for being here. So what I'll be talking about is our most recent initiative from the Cultural Commodification Working Group. We gathered in May 2013 for a symposium and workshop titled Indigenous Peoples Commodification and Self-Determination. And along with some talks, we had a couple of days to think about ways that we as the working group and as IPinCH could move forward on a few things that we can actually do to help better protect Indigenous cultural heritage. So we did a few things more on the pedagogical university side, such as gathering syllabi for courses and video viewing guides and a few other kind of documents for teaching in university, but we mostly at students in the social sciences, anthropologists and lawyers and such. Whereas one of the other items on our to-do list was to address more directly people working in the design, fashion, and other creative industries. And the idea was to put together a kind of resource that would make them think more critically about cultural appropriation. As we know, there are controversies cropping up pretty much every other week of a fashion designer or other type of designer referencing indigenous cultural heritage or copying even some designs. And so we thought we need to not only address ourselves to other academics, and not only other academics in our disciplines, but also more look at to industry. So what I'm not going to go through all of it in detail, but in the last few months we've been putting together this booklet called Think Before You Appropriate, Things to Know and Questions to Ask in Order to Avoid Cultural Misappropriation. We just recently finished this first draft and are gathering a little bit of feedback from a few key players to make sure that everything in there is ready to be shared. But I'll just scroll down. Is everybody seeing me scroll down? Yes?
Looks good, yes.
Okay. So I'll just show it really quickly. We present what this guide is about and what we aim for people to take away from it. Some definitions of cultural heritage and appropriation and misappropriation. Why we think just following intellectual property laws, which is what some designers will do, isn't enough, especially when it comes to non-Western cultural heritage. And then we outline some aspects of what could be a responsible collaboration. We didn't want this booklet to be a guide. We all know that there's more complicated than that, but we did want to kind of put some principles forward as first steps of things to think about and things to try to aim for, including issues of consent, shared control, acknowledgements and attributions, and being thoughtful about cultural differences in these kinds of partnerships, and of course benefit sharing and reciprocity. Just quickly scrolling down, and hope you'll get a chance to look at it more closely. But we also wanted to be pretty clear about, because we were addressing ourselves to people who are thinking as, usually business people, even if they're in their creative world, we wanted to look at, what are the costs for them, to kind of outline, clearly for them, why they should be careful about not just in terms of what it does to other people, but also what for their company that might represent. So we have a few points about that. And similarly, pointing out what would be the benefits of actually engaging in collaboration, if they really do feel like Indigenous cultural heritage is important for their project. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the interesting aspects of this is that we also have a few fictional examples of appropriation that are inspired by real life examples, but are not, actual ones. We decided in this particular booklet not to be pointing fingers to towards particular companies or artists, and be more general. For a few different reasons I won't detail today, but we wanted still to be able to draw on some examples to explain the different ways that misappropriation takes. So again, I won't go into details, but we have a few of these. So that's basically the ending questions. What questions do you need to ask yourself before engaging in any kind of being inspired by, and then if you really feel like this is something you want to go forward with, what kind of relationship are you going to be engaging in? So that's for the booklet. We're still kind of fine-tuning the little details, and we have some feedback still to integrate into that. The other thing I wanted to share, now let me see if I can do this very smoothly, is can you see now the...
Maybe just give it a minute. It seems like it's you threw it for a little bit of a loop. Poor thing.
Okay.
There, something happened.
Okay. How about now?
So far, it's just you, beautiful you, Solène. Oh, there we go. There it is.
Well, while it's okay. This is absolutely a mock-up I put together really quickly. So I should say I didn't mention thanks to all of the people who contributed to the booklet, including Eric Siddons, who helped with the layout, did the layout and did the drawings. That was really extremely helpful. This is not his work. This is mine. But what I wanted to show is that the book itself needs to be kind of couched in other resources. And one idea that we have now, that's what I'll end on, is creating a blog where the booklet would be made available as a resource to use with when these kinds of controversies happen, but also send them to this blog, which would, the basic principles of it would be to, every time a controversy comes up, every time we are witness to a new case of misappropriation, which is, as we all know, relatively frequent, we could then take that opportunity to not only write a short commentary on this particular case, but also highlight the great work that's being done by Indigenous fashion designers or other designers, or a good example of collaboration, which we don't have currently in the book that we wanted to have in this format of a blog. So this is very, very preliminary thoughts on what this blog could look like. but basically, a blog with links to the controversy. And if I can manage to move this thing, I don't know if I can move this thing down at all.
You've done it.
Making the booklet available as a resource, and then, of course, an about page. More resources in terms of laws and declarations, indigenous organizations, things that we chose not to include directly into the booklet to keep it as light as possible in terms of length of content, because we're not aimed at an academic audience. And then finally, a kind of a contact that would be a little bit of a misappropriation hotline in some ways, or actually even just to share more positive stories. So encouraging people to share so that we can populate the blog with more examples. So this blog idea is very, very new. The book has been in the works for a little while longer, but we're still figuring out exactly what this is. And if you have any feedback or questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Feedback or questions for Solène?
I have a question, Solène.
Yes.
It's Kathy here.
Yes.
Yes. Will the booklet be downloadable? Available on the web? Can we download it from the web, or will we have to write to acquire it?
No, well, I'm pretty sure as soon as it's finalized as a first draft, we're open to kind of having new drafts as we improve. But once that is done, it should be available on the IPinCH website, but you can also just write me. I think we've corresponded before, right? So,
yes.
And the idea is to have it available as a resource. Yes, we've right now are thinking it's not worth printing out in 1,000 copies or such, but the online PDF version, yes, we hope to have it available for everyone.
Okay. Right. Oh, and another question too. Are you familiar with Carmen Artigas? Carmen has worked in India for 20 years, and she gave an incredible presentation at last year's Textile Society of America meetings, Cultural Misappropriation in the Era of Ethical Fashion. She has a website. I'll email it to you. It's fabulous. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll send it. Thank you.
Well, thank you both.
That was great.
Thank you both so very much for that excellent work here, Solène. So congratulations on making it this far. Drew McGill, are you with us? Are you available?
I think so. Am I here?
Yeah, terrific. Go for it.
Well, hello all. I'm very happy to be here and participating. And thanks for everyone working behind the scenes to organize it. I'm just going to try now to share the screen. We'll see how this works. And pull up in a PowerPoint. Nothing yet? Do you all see anything?
Not so far, Drew.
All right. How about now?
There, it's loading now.
Okay. Well, I'll just mention in brief then that the Research Ethics Working Group, since IPinCH has began, has been gathering resources such as examples of codes of ethics in the knowledge base, but also listening to the models of collaborative practice that are emerging from IPinCH in order to try to document improving and best practices, especially in collaborative working relationships with Indigenous communities. Are we okay so far?
Terrific.
All right. Well, this will move forward for me. All right. I'm not sure what's going on. All right. Well, basically, one of the projects that I'm working on now, quickly, is that I also chair the Society for American Archaeology's Committee on Ethics, and our committee has been tasked by the SAA board to attempt a revision to the SAA principles of archaeological ethics, which were developed in the early 90s, formally adopted in the mid 90s, So they're old and don't accurately reflect where I think American archaeology should be or may go in the future. And so you see the principles laid out here, and you see some of the context of their use in the quote. And in participating in IPinCH events, such as the various gatherings, I've been taking notes on some of the lessons of research ethics that have been coming up as important things to think about when revising these principles. So, for example, the fact that ethics needs to be professional ethics in archaeology needs to be less about codification and more of a conversation and debate. And certainly we've heard that critique before with the SAA principles, that they're a floor of behavior, that somebody can just cite, a simple name of a word like stewardship and think that they're being ethical, when there's a lot more to ethics than a code. Also balancing obligations within ethics, obligations between ownership and dissemination, as was just being eloquently discussed with the conversations about appropriation. Also, things like acknowledging the fact that Indigenous peoples have more than a stakeholder relationship with the past and with heritage. Right now, the SAA principles they list Native Americans as one of many stakeholders, potential stakeholders for public education. That's obviously not enough to acknowledge the special obligations archaeologists have to Indigenous people. So here are some of the ways that I'm attempting to take IPinCH values and IPinCH lessons learned from the community-based initiatives and transform the SAA principles of ethics from being primarily object-centered, focused on the stewardship of sites and things and the production of new knowledge about the past, and providing students the training to continue to discover the past, changing the frame of that ethics to be more people-centered, to acknowledge that archaeology is not research about people, it is research involving human subjects and human populations, and therefore we need to make our ethics more people-centered and have, instead of a primacy on stewardship, have a greater focus on respect and caretaking, instead of focusing on knowledge gain, focusing instead on how to appropriately hold and encounter knowledge, and changing from, instead of just not making sure you don't harm anyone, to actually doing good with our work and providing students what they need in terms of training to share authority and to collaborate. That's it. So I will jump back to my face if I can here. And if anyone has any questions.
Don't be bashful, folks. We have many alternatives for you to chime in.
Hi, Drew. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We hear you, Sven.
I just had one suggestion and one question. The suggestion is I like the moving away from object-centered. I wonder if moving solely to people-centered is the way to go. And I sort of probably draw from classical Marx here about social relations between what we call objects, but with what many of the communities we work among consider to be other beings or things that are constitutive of themselves, of identity, through to, I suppose the fashionable way of putting it would be in a sort of actor-network frame, but I think we actually have an indigenous frame that is more adequate to say, how do we get a sort of a code of ethical practice and a practice that pushes beyond the human into our entanglements with these objects. In other words, what are the rights of objects and what can they reasonably expect of us? So that would be the comment. The question is just, as with many ethical codes, what do you do when there's not consensus and when there's abuse? How do you then enforce ethics. And I just mention this because often people see ethics as relatively toothless. But I think we need to emphasize the hard edge more, that any of us, if we were accused of and found guilty of ethical malfeasance, it would be very difficult to continue practicing our craft. So they do have teeth, I think much more so than laws, which tend to be quite blunt instruments. So that just, I suppose they're both great comments, but I'll end it there. I don't want to take up much time, Eric. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Those are excellent comments. And yes, I should say that the principles will be revised and not entirely replaced. So certainly there will be room for a discussion of objects and their place in archaeology in terms of ethics. So I appreciate that comment. And yes, the SAA does not have any means by which members might be brought up on ethical charges, but the RPA does, and SAA encourages its members to become RPA members. But it's something to consider. And one way we attempt to at least show some of those disagreements is through our Ethics Bowl event, where we debate case studies, and that has also been taken up by WAC, by the World Archaeological Congress, in an international sort of way. So we'll try to keep moving forward with that. Thanks, Ken.
Other comments or questions? I guess, Drew, the one thing that comes to my mind is just to learn a little bit about the greeting that your shift to, relationship and people-centered approach to ethics is having among your colleagues on the SAA committee.
Yeah, it's still in negotiation. Certainly, a number of American archaeologists don't want to have the stewardship principle disappear. But I think many people acknowledge that it shouldn't be the first thing that people think about. That there's ways of balancing those obligations. So it's been an interesting discussion. Actually, I've sent some of the IPinCH case study reports to the committee as examples to try to help them to better understand some of these object-people relationships, like Sven was discussing. Super.
Thank you, Drew. Excellent presentation and very important work that you're doing. So what we will do is now shift to learn whether or not Teresa is available and ready to participate.
Yes, I'm here. I just need to get my PowerPoint up and running.
Okay. That sounds good, Teresa. While you're doing that, I'll just take a moment to, oh, look how quickly you did that. That's great.
I was prepared.
Excellent. Have at it, Teresa. We're all yours.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm on a desktop, so unfortunately you don't get to see me in person, but my name is Teresa Nichols. I'm the project manager and postdoctoral research fellow for Learning NAGPRA, Resources for Teaching and Training. This is a new research project based at Indiana University that's funded by the National Science Foundation. And the purpose of this project is to study how repatriation is taught and learned, primarily in American universities, and to then work in a collegium, a workshop format, to preparing interventions to improve educational resources that are currently available. And so in 2014 and 2015, researchers from Indiana University applied for funding from the National Science Foundation. And this funding is provided through a program called Cultivating Cultures for Ethical STEM, which is looking at really what constitutes ethical STEM research and practice, and what cultural institutions and contexts promote ethical STEM research and practice, and how can those be improved. And so we received 2 grants to fund 2 different phases of the Learning NAGPRA project. So the first phase was started this year in 2015. And so the goal of this first year is really to do a lot of background research to get a sense of, right now across the United States, what are educators teaching and what are students learning about NAGPRA and related issues in American universities. We've also done a lot of project planning, and a big part of that has been holding our first collegium, where a number of 25 different cultural specialists, educators, and graduate students gathered together to kind of talk about what they perceive to be some of the major challenges and barriers to improving repatriation education. So starting next year, we'll begin phase 2, which will move into focusing very heavily on educational materials.
I'm sorry, Teresa, I'm sorry to interrupt. I wonder if your slides are advancing on your side. We can't see change in the slides on this side. We just see your title slide.
Oh, okay. Yes, there's been 2 more slides.
So sorry.
No, thanks for pointing that out. Let me try to stop sharing and to start again. All right. Let's see.
So we're told that one thing that could matter, Teresa, is if you play the slideshow, in other words, launch the slideshow, that'll allow your screen to take more fully over the system. It should go into the system rather than just using the sort of PowerPoint editor.
Yeah, I was playing. Do you see something titled Learning Egg for Project Phases right now?
Yes, now we do.
Okay, so yeah, we'll try to keep this going. So yeah, this first year, 2015, has been a real focus on background research, project planning, and having our first collegium workshop. And then in phase 2, we're going to focus a lot more on developing educational materials and then disseminating those materials and continuing to work with those collegiums and having working groups for more specific products. Okay, so let me try. So we have 4 principal investigators on the project, 2 senior personnel, and then we're working with 2 consultants at the Institute of American Indian Arts. So like I mentioned, I'm just the project manager. So April Siebert at Indiana University, who's the director of the Glenn Black Laboratory of Archaeology, is the principal investigator, and then we have 3 other co-PIs who are also based at Indiana University.
So again, Teresa, I'm sorry, again, we're still stuck on the Learning NAGPRA project phases. There we go. There you advanced it.
Okay, so is it called phase 1 now?
It was,
Maybe?
Now it's phase 1. Yep, there you go.
Okay. All right, so phase 1. So this year, I've been doing a lot of interviews with educators, students, and repatriation professionals for the background research. And we sent 2 different online surveys, one targeted to students and one to faculty. And these were sent to anthropology and museum studies related programs at American universities. So they were sent out twice in April and September. And so from current students, we received 1,175 responses, and from educators, we had 349. So this is a really big data set that we're currently working through and analyzing. I've also requested course syllabi from different instructors, and I'm working my way through those, and then doing a textual analysis of introductory textbooks from anthropology and museum studies courses. Okay, do you see a slide titled Learning NAGPRA Collegium?
Yes, yay.
Okay, there's a wonderful, fantastic picture. So again, even though I'm the one doing this presentation, this is definitely very much a group effort. So in August 14th and 15th, we had 25 cultural specialists, students, and education professionals that gathered here at Indiana University Bloomington for the first collegium. And so this collegium is really drawing from the scholarship of teaching and learning. It's designed to create collaborative spaces where participants can collaborate and evaluating information and brainstorming paths forward for better teaching and learning about NAGPRA. Okay, so this has just been a really brief overview of the project. As you can see, we're still very much in early phases and we still have a couple years ahead of us. So ways to get in touch. I'm always really happy to hear from anybody through email. So you can see my email at Teresa Nichols right there. We also do have a project website, learningnagpra.indiana.edu, which has a lot of information about what we're doing month to month. It has our first newsletter with more information about the first collegium. It also has suggested resources, including books, articles, and videos that teachers might find helpful, and a list of hopefully more recent publications. Especially since NAGPRA is still very much an evolving law, a lot of things have happened, especially since 2010, that educators might not always have the most up-to-date sources that they can use in the classroom. We also do have a Twitter account to just try to keep up with what's going on in terms of national and international conversations about repatriation practice and education. And then we also have a newsletter we send out about 2 to 3 times a year So you can also email me to sign up for that. So in the spring, we'll start focusing, doing more comparative research, looking at different types of institutions. So not just your standard Euro-American university, but also tribal colleges and universities, and Native Americans serving, but non-tribal institutions as well. We'll also start organizing for the second collegium and getting our working groups together. And because we have a lot of that survey data that I mentioned, we'll have a white paper report that should be available on our website in the spring. So I'm still doing ongoing interviews if anybody would like to share their thoughts on repatriation. And we'll also be doing a presentation at the Society for American Archaeology in April. So that's just a little bit brief intro of our project, and thank you guys so much for your time, and happy to hear questions, comments, and yes, please do email me. Okay.
Any comments or questions for Teresa? Again, super important work, Teresa. I'm wondering if you've bumped into the repatriation bibliography that Robin Ewing and TJ Ferguson and I put together. It's on the library resource page here at SFU, and it kind of stops around 2007, but otherwise it's over 1,000 entries as last time I checked it. So I'll email you the link to it.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. One thing, it was really great to hear more about the knowledge base, because I haven't gotten into plumbing the depths of that. So definitely looking forward to co-sharing resources.
Any other comments? It looks like somebody else unmuted themselves. Good. Sven has something. Good.
This is sort of a plea or a question for anyone who has advice. I can't reveal too much, but this is a repatriation case. What do you do if you have human remains in one place, shall we say, I can't say where, and they have, they come from another place, another country, but you don't know where from that other country. This is part of a colonial violence of the early 20th century. And it's important to return those people, but in the place they need to be returned to, it's important that they return to the right people. But we don't know who the right people are, so we can't do things like any standard archaeological analyses and those types of things. And the danger is that these people literally remain in a limbo because we don't know where to return them to. If anyone's got any advice there, it would be gratefully received.
Geez, you got everybody stumped, Sven. What a surprise. I guess
I'm
we'll
just wondering if this is a...
Go ahead, Claire.
I'm wondering if this is a case where DNA might actually be useful for Aboriginal people.
The problem is to get consent to sample for DNA requires that we know who the group is first.
So you haven't got even the region, you haven't got something like, all the people from that community or some other place.
We only have, because these people were treated as specimens, we only have the provenance to state level. So several million square kilometers.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, that's difficult, isn't it?
Well, I think that one's going to have to wait for an offline conversation because it's a complicated issue. So what we're going to do now is make a transition to Chelsea Maloche, who's right here with us live and in person. Thanks, Chelsea.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Chelsea Maloche, and I'm a new PhD student here at Simon Fraser University. I completed both my BA in anthropology and my MA in sociology at the University of Windsor in Ontario. And today, even though it's not really about looking back, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I got here and to where I hope to go. So I've only got the one slide, so it's really easy. I've only recently joined the IPinCH network as I began my PhD research here in September. My experiences with the project thus far, though, have greatly benefited my own research, but also they've contributed to the way that I have thought and rethought about my role and obligations as a researcher. My interest in these issues began with my master's research at the University of Windsor. When I began my MA there, I was all set to go out there and do something real with my research to affect real change for someone in the world. So enter John Albanese, who reminded me of a collection of skeletal remains known as the Reichley collection that were part of the university's old archaeological collections, and which he had been trying to properly repatriate for almost a decade. So when I applied to the program, we didn't know exactly how my work would play out. Would I complete a study considering the social power of human remains? Would I work to consider the different ways that Indigenous remains in particular are approached, or would it be something else entirely? Well, as you can probably guess, it was just that, something else entirely. After meeting with Russell Noddy, the campus's Aboriginal Education Coordinator, who had been part of the repatriation discussion from the beginning, we decided to work to inventory the collection and then work to research and learn as much about repatriation, the repatriation process in Canada as we could for future reference. To do this, I also worked with the Heritage Centre on Walpole Island First Nation, who was the consulted First Nation for this collection. And working with this small group of people gave my MA project a new life and sent it off in directions that I hadn't anticipated. From then on, I worked with members of the Walpole Island community already involved in discussions to document the processes followed in the hope that it would inform the construction of a local repatriation protocol. Then in 2014, I was able to actually participate in the final return and reburial of the remains as well. Working with these people brought me a different perspective on how to conceptualize this process and what the importance of documenting it was for the community. In the course of that project, though, I was also introduced to IPinCH when Russell, who was on my committee, provided me a link to an IPinCH video, and the video brought me to the website and provided me with the wealth of information collected there that helped to develop and write my thesis and virtually introduced me to my supervisor, Dr. George Nicholas, and as they say, the rest is history. In coming to Simon Fraser this fall, I was actually able to volunteer for the IPinCH DNA and Indigeneity Symposium and workshops, and being my first IPinCH experience, I was both excited and to be involved, but nervous about meeting people that have done such amazing work in my field of research. I needn't have worried so much because once I got past being a bit starstruck, I was able to see the comfortable dynamic network that I had been able to become a part of. Being able to discuss my own research interests with these people was an invaluable experience for a fledgling researcher like myself. Different perspectives on research questions and approaches are learned through interactions like these, and important connections can be made just through conversations. As a student, this can be one of the most important parts of graduate school, meeting the people that will change the way you think about things to change what you do about things, and the IPinCH network provides that. Moving forward, I will further explore the importance of repatriation in today's world by considering the impact that returning ancestral remains has for those communities involved. I hope to be able to work with communities and institutions that have experienced the repatriation of ancestral human remains to consider both the benefits and realities of the process and what the effects of that process have been. I'm also interested in the reciprocal nature of collaborative research relationships that often develop and how this important research is shared with the wider community. From my experiences, the difficulty of locating valuable resources and information on a process that's not clearly outlined in Canada is of the utmost importance. A central place to provide access to information like this would help those First Nations that are interested in pursuing requests, or in the case of the Reichley collection, they're confronted with an institution seeking to return remains, and they're not sure how or where to begin. Web resources grouped by this and other topics compiled into one place, like the IPinCH resources page and the knowledge base, would be a great way to carry this conversation forward, and perhaps the incorporation of something like an open message board for those beginning their search for information would offer the network further space to grow and include the next generation of researchers like myself. So part of what I hope to contribute to the IPinCH heritage, and part of what I've taken away from my short involvement here, has been the importance of a socially engaged research that can affect tangible change for communities, but also how beneficial that experience can be for the researcher too. So thank you. I think that was 5 minutes.
Yeah, that was terrific. Let's just find out if there's any comments or questions.
Okay. Are there any comments or questions? It's a strange experience.
It is a strange.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
You did a great job.
Thank you.
There you go.
But just in case anybody's chimed in with I just want to see whether anybody's written in before we let Chelsea off the hook here.
Just go with this.
I just do that. Yes, we have a few more.
These are.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, you need to be.
Oh, there's just a couple of suggestions
I think these
that are coming in on the
these are
previous
from
ones.
through.
Yeah, just making sure that we're up to date. So,
Good.
so great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea. Next up is somebody near and dear to us, but we're not sure whether or not we're going to be able to hear her. Kathy, are you there? I have you unmuted. We should be able to hear you. I'm going to try to unmute you on both sides. How about now, Kathy? She's having some problems. Oh, you removed her. No, I haven't quite done that yet. She hasn't behaved poorly so far, so no removal. Okay, Kathy, I have you unmuted on 3 different inputs.
Yeah, I'm trying.
There you are! Yay!
Yay.
I'm going to try one at a time to figure out which one is live, Kathy.
It's the uppercase one that's live, I think.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, John, can you hear me?
Yes. We hear you well.
Hello?
We can hear you, Kathy. I'm sorry. We can hear you fine.
Sorry, I've got a really bad feedback here. How's that?
That may be a little better. How about now?
Yeah, that's better for me.
Good.
Sorry, folks, I'm working on 2 different computers. Our person who helps us with this stuff is way ill today, so I apologize for that.
No reason for apologies. Believe me, we're all getting used to this interesting way of communicating. Although we do have to give ourselves credit for, if nothing else, reducing the IPinCH carbon footprint by doing things this way. So it's not quite as convivial, but it is a little bit more resource conservation oriented. Go ahead, Kathy.
So, John asked me to sort of reflect a bit and comment on what's been heard so far. And I guess as a legal scholar, there are 3 themes that have been coming out that I've been hearing in terms of areas where more work needs to be done, and I think that people will be moving towards. One of the things, of course, that is, I think, evident to all of us is the conflict between property rights and law and Indigenous legal traditions and economic interests. And I think that this really brings home to me the importance of the work that we're doing in education and ethics, because it's extremely hard to change property rights regimes, both at a national and international level. And in particular, the discussions around the appropriation and the knockoffs and the impact that this has on Indigenous peoples and their economies has really brought home to me the importance of educating lawyers. And so this has been part of the work that I've been trying to do. But I also think the work towards educating businesses and the public is really important too. Because I think our experience has been with things like the Think Before You Appropriate initiative is when people are aware of the impact, there's a lot of sort of social and public support for change. So that's one of the themes that I've been hearing. Another theme that I've been hearing in the discussions around traditional knowledge and NAGPRA is the intersection between human rights and Indigenous rights and property rights. And I really think there's not a lot more work to be done, particularly in Canada, in this area. We're beginning to read our obligations in light of the United Nations Declaration. And I think we have a lot of lessons to learn here from the United States, which views NAGPRA very much as human rights legislation and not just Indigenous legislation, and certainly not property rights legislation. And in Canada, we've worked very much within a property rights framework. And so I think shifting away from this emphasis on property to ethics and to human rights is going to be really fundamental. And another thing, I guess, that I'm hearing is the importance of us making sure that we have access to multidisciplinary educational resources in our discussions around the knowledge base and our discussions around what students and future researchers are wanting to do. A concern I have as a member of the steering committee, I guess, I appreciate very much our access to electronic resources, but I know others here work with people in communities where access to web resources are not as easy. So, for example, I'll be doing some work in Cuba this spring where it's very hard for them to access web resources. So, thinking about how we can make these resources available in non-electronic formats are really important. So those are a few of the comments that I have just based on what I've heard so far. And I'm really excited about the initiatives that I've been hearing about.
Thank you so much. I'm going to just briefly take you offline, Kathy, so that we can learn whether or not there's other questions or comments. There we go. Not sure why there's some terrible feedback on Kathy's end, but here's an opportunity to hear from others that are listening in or watching.
Hi, John. This is Kate. Can you hear me?
Yeah, wonderfully well. Thank you, Kate.
Hi, everybody. Hello, everyone. Catherine, I just want to echo or, make a comment based on something you said about digital access. I think in the work that Natasha and I will talk about and in other digital projects that I've been involved in, it really has become clear that the digital can't be the only mode of access to material, and we can't rely too heavily on it. So for anyone, the portals become obsolete, and we can't even be certain that material will be accessible for even the most digitally savvy people 10 or 15 years from now. So I think we have to be thinking across mediums and providing alternative ways of accessing the material.
Can you give us a couple of ideas on what you think would work well?
I don't know. I mean, I think I can think of virtual exhibits that I've been involved in where we have, produced a book, for example, or some kind of exhibition catalog that goes from digital back to print. So even if something is born in digital, there's no reason it cannot take on a new life in print. So I think the digital doesn't have to be the end destination. Maybe there are other ways of compiling material or going from something that might seem complex digitally into some kind of just print form that will ultimately last longer.
Yeah, that's similar to a project that's going on in Apache country in Arizona now, where they've developed a pretty elaborate set of online resources on what's called the Apache Natural World Project. And so it's a categorical project to break the world up into meaningful elements, plants, animals, stars, rocks, landforms, and provide the Apache words and the dialectical variations among the different Apache groups, and have that all stored nicely available. But what people want is things that they can carry with them around and be able to access any place they are, so that they can have effectively, a field guide to the Apache universe with them. And this is proving to be a very popular way of approaching things. So I think you're on target there, Kate. Seems to make a lot of sense in a lot of different places. And there are a couple of other comments here that are, at least partially related. And sorry, I have to admit I wasn't as familiar with the chat tool as I should have been, and so I wasn't always scrolling down to the bottom of the chat comments. So if that discouraged you from sending in more comments, please don't let it. Now I finally know how it works, and we'll do a better job of trying to monitor those that are writing in through the Blue Jeans system. Apparently the non-Blue Jeans system also has the ability to write in, but we're not getting very many comments there, so far at least. In any case, a number of presenters, this comes in from Julie Hollowell, who writes in that a number of different community partners associated with IPinCH have commented on their hope that that researchers, especially academic researchers, avail themselves of opportunities to get retrained. That is like as useful as some academic training is. There's also an opportunity to retrain some of the older dogs, I guess we could say, in the group one way or another to see whether or not they can develop some new tricks for it. And that's certainly been a lifelong project for me. I don't know if anybody has any ideas about how that might happen or a useful way to pursue that work or examples of where it's occurred.
I have a comment, if you can hear me.
Yeah, good, Sven, we hear you.
So, well, again, just two quick ones. One, endorsing what Kate says, the sort of allure of the new, of things digital has very much worn off, and certainly communities we work with don't necessarily have electricity, never mind the inclination to look at digital things. I mean, when was the last time anyone sat with the family album, the actual photographs, and had a look at them rather than on a screen? It's quite a different experience. And so we found what works very well is posters with a lot of pictures, particularly of people on whatever project you've been, as a kind of give back works really well. And for the archaeologists in the room, there's a real materiality there. As you say, it does require some retraining in a sort of more visual associative logic rather than a textual descriptive logic. But the hard copy is, if anything, has become more valued in certain sectors. And then the second thing was on Kathy's human rights comment, just to point out that in particularly the case of human remains, many heritage legal systems classify human remains as heritage objects or resources in one way or another. And so while when you present that, people go, oh, that can't be right, that is often what is in the statute and what governs the repatriation process. We recently had a case from Austria to South Africa where initially there was a disinclination to return the human remains as people because it would require various biological permits, transportation of biological material permits to be filled in, and they literally wanted to return these people in a diplomatic pouch, and that's all because of the classification as an object, not as a person. Thank you.
Oh, fascinating. Very good. Thank you, Kathy, for stimulating that conversation and for your other comments. We're going to turn our attention now to Bonnie Newsom, if she's available and with us here. Bonnie, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you just great and see you well as well.
Great. I don't have slides, so I'm just going to wing it today, so thank you. It's good to be here. Thank you for having me, and good to see some old friends and to make some new ones. My name is Bonnie Newsom, and I'm a member of the Penobscot Nation. We are an indigenous community in Maine. And I'm here to share with you an update on IP activities at Penobscot since we finished our project. The Penobscot Nation IPinCH project was designed to create an internal process to develop tribal protocols, tools, and organizational structures to address IP issues related to archaeology and heritage-based places. And through the collaborative work of the Penobscot IP Working Group and their partners at UMass Amherst, the project resulted in the following community products. We created a management plan for Penobscot IP rights relative to heritage-based places. We created a sample MOA for archaeology conducted on tribal lands. We created a tribal certification procedure for archaeologists who do work on tribal lands. And we designed a researcher training process to sensitize researchers to Penobscot culture and IP issues. The Penobscot Nation Tribal Council approved the protocols and procedures, and the project, the IPinCH project, was completed in 2012. And since that time, the tribe built upon this foundational work with a strong focus on IP related to language, reclamation, revitalization, and protection. And with some support from the Administration for Native Americans, the Penobscots developed tribal IP policy, which sets forth basic principles such as the assertion of inherent tribal sovereignty over all tribal knowledge, heritage, and cultural resources, including the Penobscot language. And this policy asserts that the Penobscot Nation shall be recognized and consulted as the primary cultural custodians of their language, our language, tribal knowledge, and heritage, irrespective of whether it's in the public domain or arbitrarily owned by third parties. As part of the Penobscot language-related work, the tribe is currently negotiating 2 memoranda of understanding to address protection and management of Penobscot language materials. And one agreement is with the American Philosophical Society, and the other is with the University of Maine at Orono. And both institutions are holders of Penobscot language materials, and these agreements aim to establish the Penobscot's rights as cultural custodians of Penobscot cultural heritage and language. And these MOUs outline appropriate guidelines and principles for the management, care, and circulation of Penobscot language materials. One final IP aspect of the Penobscot's language-related efforts is an agreement currently being negotiated with the University of Maine Press on the copyright and publication of the Penobscot Language Dictionary. And this agreement is designed to address not only copyright ownership and publication parameters, but also other decisions about the design, price, layout, and other aspects of the publication process. We at Penobscot still have much work to do in implementing the heritage protection protocols developed through the IPinCH project, particularly in areas of archaeology and heritage-based places. However, given the fragile nature of the Penobscot language, the IP work around language protection has been established as a priority. And the Penobscot Cultural and Historic Preservation Department is working to identify potential funding sources to support further implementation of the model created through the IPinCH initiative. It's expected that the IPinCH-related work at Penobscot will continue well into the future, and most importantly, that this work will be community-driven. And so I guess I would close by saying that the IPinCH project has put IP in the minds of the people within the community. So we've begun to weave it throughout all initiatives that we undertake. And so I think out of everything that we've done, having that piece having it become visible and prominent within the community as something that can be part of everything we do, I think that is probably the most important outcome of our project. And like I said, we will continue on. So thank you very much. And I answer any questions that folks have.
Indeed. Any questions for Bonnie? The question that comes to my mind, Bonnie, is whether or not you feel like the new, I'll call it a protocol, the new process that you're going to use is, do you think it will strengthen the relationships with the I'll call it a research community, or is that of interest? what will it mean for the relationship between the Penobscot and especially external researchers?
Well, I hope it will. I think when you enter into a relationship with researchers, I think it's important that you lay out everything first, and when you sit down at the table initially and say, this is how we hope to operate and hope to engage with you, then there aren't any surprises. And so I feel like the work that we've done at Penobscot has moved us in that direction so that we can, come up with our own research agenda and say, and when we're approached, say that, yeah, we would like to participate and work with you, but these are our priorities, and how can your work fit within those? And so I feel like that initial kind of laying some ground rules is good for everybody, and it takes away a lot of the questions and potential disagreements that may occur when things aren't spelled out clearly to start off with. Long answer to your question, John, but
no, I think it's a terrific answer. Thank you. And there's a couple of other comments along the same lines. Alexis Bunton just wrote in and said, great work, Bonnie, and all the others that on the team at Penobscot. And keeps the interface keeps shifting around. I think it's because other people are chiming in, which is great. Yeah, and you said it, and then Alexis's other comment was the pertaining to the importance of bringing researchers to Penobscot's table, to the agenda that you say is under development and is being shaped in part by engaging with these issues. So it seems very valuable.
Right, and we're not alienating folks at all, and we do continue to work with consultants and academics. But I think it's become a much more community-driven process for us, and that excites me.
And Alexis is and that is exciting, I think, from many different vantages, just by way of what Alexis was referring to as kind of recentering things and rebalancing things. And then further comments that she has been enjoyed learning and observing IPinCH activities that the ground rules oftentimes need to be repeated numerous times for outside researchers to sort of understand the strength of conviction and what it actually means. So that's another important point.
I'd like to just close with one comment. I've been with IPinCH for a long time, and I remember starting off and feeling like there was some thoughts people had that we weren't capable of doing this work ourselves. Way back when some of the early grants were written, even, and so we can do this work ourselves. And I think it's important to remind people of that we are quite capable of managing our own funds and doing our own things. So,
well, this project has certainly demonstrated that in a really important way. So thank you for this excellent work, Bonnie. So,
thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we got some interesting other comments coming through. Bonnie, people just had to know whether or not the darling nugget above your head is an early childhood picture of you or somebody else right behind you.
No, that's actually my youngest daughter. She's actually 14 now, so
beautiful.
Or 15. Forgive me, she wouldn't like that.
Well, it's a great subliminal message to keep the focus on the future, right? So
that's right.
Okay.
That's right.
So we're going to move on, if that's all right with everybody, to Duncan Mathewson, who's with us. So Duncan, are you feeling available and ready to proceed?
Wait.
Duncan?
Yeah, we're getting there. Can
Excellent.
you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you well. If you could move your camera up, then we could see your full head too, instead of just the middle part of your glasses. If you could readjust the position of your camera. Shoot, Duncan. Duncan, I'm sorry, we still have you muted somehow. Sorry, Duncan. I hate to intervene, but somehow we have you muted again. So could you unmute? What the heck is going on?
Can you hear me now?
There you go. Now we got you again.
Very good.
Nobody touch
Well,
anything.
I don't touch anything. I'm very pleased to follow Bonnie because periodically we have been in contact over the last year or so. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a latecomer to IPinCH. I'm an archaeologist and anthropologist here in Vermont. And I began a project to develop a updated regional synthesis of Wabanaki people in northern New England, stretching into the Canadian Maritimes, crossing 3 different states and the Canadian border to try to come up with some new ways of looking at how the Wabanaki peoples evolved since Paleo-Indian times. And while I was at Dartmouth College, I heard Bill Fitzhugh, as a visiting professor, talk about IPinCH, and I realized I had already started to do some things that IPinCH were already doing in my book, which is hopefully will be published next year by the University Press of New England. One of my concerns in the book is to develop a whole concept of indigenous archaeology in order to try to reach out to native peoples to expand the knowledge of the past so that we can all better deal with present contemporary problems. And one of the ways of doing that, and I'll show you a map here, just to give you an idea of the area we're talking about. I think, do you see that map?
It's loading. Nice work. It's loading right up. We'll have it in just a second. There it is, Duncan.
Okay. That's the area we're talking about, stretching all the way from Lake Champlain over there in the west, all the way through to Nova Scotia and the Canadian Maritimes. It's a group of 5 different nations, all very closely related, Algonquin speakers, all having a fascinating cultural history going way back into Paleo times. In trying to develop an indigenous archaeology approach, I looked at trying to develop an interdisciplinary model with what I call doing above ground archaeology. And that is to use the historical, both written and oral, the linguistic ethnography, along with the archaeological information, to develop a whole new holistic approach, revising all the work that's been done over the last 25, 30 years. A lot of this work has really not been updated. So in order to develop a regional overview over this very large area, I wanted to include what I call indigenous voices. And these are people, artists, researchers, storytellers that would provide sidebars into the regular narrative. sometimes presenting an alternative explanation to what the scientific archaeological information is telling us. In this way, I think we're broadening the participation, broadening the sharing of the knowledge in a way that adds to the final story. And by doing this, I think that we're trying to expand not only the knowledge that archaeologists are finding in the past, but also bringing it up to the future in terms of trying to help to provide solutions to some of the indigenous peoples' contemporary issues that we're all interested in working on. And with that, I will just close by saying that part of the royalties from this book will be donated to the Native American Studies program at Dartmouth College in order to help Native American students there who want to pursue a career in archaeology and anthropology, to help them in the future develop their own projects to learn about their own heritage. With that, I'll just end and be very pleased to answer any questions.
Terrific, Duncan. Thank you so much. Comments or questions from folks? Well, the comment that I have is my sincere intention to do above ground archaeology as long as possible, at least for me.
Well, I want to. That's I think the future of archaeology, because it's getting very, very difficult to continue to excavate sites unless it's absolutely necessary in the cultural resource management approach.
Some years ago, Sonia Atalay and I were toying with the idea of having a website, or I don't know, anything from a symposium or a website or a retraining program called Back Away from the Trowel. So. Oh,
very good. Excellent. Thank you very much, John and George and everyone for making this possible. I want to thank everybody for allowing me to participate. It's been a real thrill.
Here's just a quandary that's come in. I guess I'll call it just an outline, just jotting down a thought about whether or not there's a different way of showing Aboriginal territories and land use besides drawing big black lines around borders that might not have been real or apparent in past times. Yeah, so that's just a question that's out there in one of the comments that's come in. I don't know if you've done any thinking about those territorial issues, Duncan, and then we'll move on to the next presenter after we get your response to that.
Well, it's a very good question, John. There's always a problem with drawing any boundaries between any ethnic homelands, because they're always in a state of flux, moving through time. So it's always very, very difficult. But that's only that big line. You'll notice we didn't do any other lines. That line is just to define the overall study area that the research is focused on.
Indeed, one of the challenges for the future, to be sure. So. Very good. Thank you very much, Duncan, for excellent presentation. Congratulations on the book. We're all looking forward to it. So without further ado, we'll move to Kate Hennessy and Natasha Lyons. Are you guys available and ready to go?
We're here. Well, I'm here. Are you there, Natasha?
Hello. Hello.
Hi. Hi. Okay. Should I share? I can kind of hear you. I'm going to share my screen, John, so you can see. Let's see. Oh, add extension. I think so.
John, am I clear?
Yeah, I can hear you kind of just barely, Natasha. Kate, we hear you loud and clear.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
We see your screen loud and clear. Thank you. Beautiful. Oh, it just popped off. It'll come back up in a second, I think. Yes, there's the Skowitz website screen. Yes.
Okay. Natasha, are you good to go?
I'm good to go as long as you can hear me.
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, so the Skowitz website, sorry, my kids just came in the door. Speaking of kids, anyway, the Skowitz project is about 25 years old now. It was the first community archaeology project in British Columbia. And the present project that we're working on is kind of an extension of that. The archaeology project laid a lot of principles about how we do archaeology in this province and how we relate to one another. It was initiated by the Skowitz First Nation, who are part of the larger Stalo Nation. And we excavated sort of a lot of sensitive areas and did kind of significant work through the 1990s and into the early 2000s. One of the sort of wishes of the band for a long time was to reunite the collections, both physically and digitally. And so the present project kind of stems from that, from the importance of having a digital representation of the objects themselves, which we are calling belongings in the website. Kate is going to be going through different parts of the website. But the project has also kind of become something else as we've engaged really deeply with Skowitz community folks and elders who have really driven the process. And I think that Kate has a screen up showing you part of the production process for the website. So about the past 2 years, we've had a series of very intensive workshops in the community to conceive of the project, to generate content, to document elders and community members talking about their histories, and sorry, I'm fending off kids. And we've been generating mini documentaries and different kinds of content. But what we want to talk about today, and I'm going to flip it over to Kate here, is to talk about the traditional knowledge labels workshop that we did that has become a real fundamental part of the website. Kate, I'm just going to give it to you. It was funded by IPinCH. And John, we also want to thank you. John's one of our team members on this project, and he's been very invaluable to us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, John. Let's see, I'm trying to get back to the photos of our workshop. Here we go. So I think everyone is familiar with the work of Jane Anderson and Kim Christian and their project localcontext.org. So they have developed a way of sort of labeling. And Tasha, can you mute your mic for a sec? Yeah. I'm getting lots of feedback. Thank you very much. So they've developed something that they're calling traditional knowledge labels and traditional knowledge licenses. Now, everybody knows, I think, about the Creative Commons as a way to attach information to digital files related to attribution, commercial or non-commercial status, and encouraging people to share digital information, but attributing the author of the information. Now, people have also found that doesn't work very well for traditional knowledge because it tends and does default to open access and doesn't deal very well with restricted information or any kind of cultural restrictions, for example. So at localcontext.org, you can go check out that website if you haven't seen it yet. They've developed a new system for thinking about licensing traditional knowledge, and it's aimed at giving communities a way of reclaiming and verifying information that's been produced about them in the past, or labeling or licensing new information. So with support from IPinCH, last year we had a workshop at Skowitz where we looked at the material that had been produced in the year before for the production of this Virtual Museum of Canada website. And then we spent time looking at the different traditional knowledge labels that Kim and Jane had been developing. And then following a model that began at Musqueam, we started basically translating and rewriting descriptions of certain labels that the community decided they wanted to use to label the entire site. So, for example, attribution has a halcomelum name. Okay, and non-commercial also. Is that going to play? Take note, Natasha. That's not. Oh, there it is. And outreach, COS. So these are labels that indicate different ways that people hope that the website will be received. So they ask to be attributed respectfully. They also indicate this is non-commercial, and they want people to respect that. And then also outreach is really important. It says this website's intended to share who we are as Skalitz people, particularly to educate. The outreach label means educating and teaching in our language. So we ask that outsiders respect our culture by not using the content out of context. If you use content on this website, please be respectful. We also encourage you to contact our band, et cetera, to learn. And what's actually really important here is to learn about us and create opportunities to learn more about us and our culture and history. There are also a couple of other labels that we use in different places. So you can see there are 3 labels here. The whole site is labeled under outreach, non-commercial, and attribution. But there are some places where the secret or sacred haha label has been applied, or the family label, where there's particular media in the site where this applies. And I can just show you that quickly. Here, there's one story, for example, by Gwen Point, where she's sharing particular family names and family information, and this video has the family label attached to it. Or in a section in the virtual exhibit, this is a section showing a selection of belongings that were excavated from Skalitz in the course of the field schools over 15 or so years. We use a label that's haha, secret or sacred, when we refer to the human remains that were excavated there. And we also, this one's just, so this one, as you see, has the secret, sacred label on it as well. So I'm sure we've used up our time, but I think what we wanted to show is with the IPinCH's support, this project, which involves many IPinCH researchers and aims to sort of provide sort of a biography of the Skalitz Nation, and also, importantly, show the history of collaborative archaeology in the community, and present through about 20 short video documentaries the beginning of community-based archaeology at Skalitz, the development of research protocols around especially the excavation of sensitive sites like Mound 1 and other burial mounds, and the development of protocols that have been shared with subsequent archaeologists who have worked with Skalitz and the Stolo Nation, and the impact this has had in the region around respectful archaeological practices. And the TK labels are a part of that. Okay, that's it. Has anyone been hearing me this whole time?
Yeah, I can guarantee you that at least the 10 people in this room have been riveted to your every remark and trying to take in the magnificent resource that you've created here. So
I was talking to my computer. Okay. All right. Thanks. Shasha, do you want to add anything? You have to unmute.
Hi there. The only thing that I would add is thanks again to the IPinCH community for really helping this research along, and also feel free to contact any of us, John, Dave Sheppy, Kate, or myself, if you would like to be on the launch list. This website will be launched probably next summer at www.digitalskalitz.ca, and we would love your feedback on it, because we're quite excited about the TK labels and other elements of it. So thanks.
And maybe just while I have the screen up, I'm just going to pull up the credits page for this website, and just to show, I'll just scroll through and show how long this list is of people who have participated in the production of the website, in the research, in the text writing, in media production over the last several years. See, it goes on and on and on and on and on and on. So it's been a huge collaborative effort.
You know, I mean, clearly you guys deserve a huge amount of the credit for it, but in my limited participation in this project, I think one of the things that distinguishes it is the level of feeling of ownership and collaboration that exists inside the community, so that it really does feel like everybody feels like it's something that represents them, their values and their interests. So that's fantastic. Other comments or questions briefly from anybody else before we turn it over to Wendy? Doesn't sound like anybody's chiming in, so and it is time to move on. So thank you, Natasha, and thank you, Kate, so much. And we'll turn the forum over to Wendy Teeter. Wendy, are you with us?
Can you hear me?
Brilliantly.
Oh, great. And can you see the screen?
Not yet.
Let's see.
Oh, hold on. Maybe I can unmute your screen.
Okay.
Did that work, Aaron? Yay, you've done it.
Excellent. So in referencing that idea of hard boundaries, I just thought I would share the way in which we, in the Tongva community, have been showing the Pimu Catalina Island Archaeology Project in the Aboriginal territory of the Tongva, which is more in a sort of a shading. So you see the villages that are part of the Tongva heritage area, as well as their neighbors and relatives, to sort of show that communication between the two, and sort of that interaction sphere that is very much rooted within the villages and the archaeological sites that people look at.
Fantastic.
Okay, so thank you for including me today. I am definitely someone who came in towards late, but have been a great admirer of IPinCH and all the initiative work, and know so many of the people that have been working so hard through it. So I was really glad to be able to join you today. I wanted to give a few examples of projects that I've been involved with and where they seem to be heading. I've been working with communities on protection and education of cultural heritage for many years, and I've been the curator of archaeology at the Fowler Museum since 1997, and half of my job has been NAGPRA. A position that not only expanded my understanding of Native North American people, being a Mesoamericanist by training, but their value systems in regards to cultural heritage and treatment of ancestors. It has been an entirely collaborative work, and being able to sort of recognize those voices and learn without having been inside the classroom has been amazing in terms of my understanding. And a large part of my work has been situated within Los Angeles area, working with the Gabrielino Tongva community, and we formed the Pimu Catalina Island Archaeology Project in 2007 with Desiree Martinez, who is Tongva and also an archaeologist from Harvard as a Harvard graduate student, and Karima Richardson, who is the staff archaeologist at the Autry National Heritage. But it was really the Tongva elders who asked us to pull this project together to resituate the kinds of dialogues and outcomes that were being put inside the books that were more about disassociating the community from their ancestors. So there's this long-standing idea by some very early archaeologists that they were wedged between other people and have only been there for, say, a few thousand years, as opposed to the 10-plus thousand years in which they have their stories, embed them within these landscapes. So while we're not obligated to come up with the same answers or the answers that they would like to see, we are using indigenous archaeology in the field to address and to apply their ways of looking at the past and their resource base that is not always seen within the archaeological record, but there will be other sort of secondary sources that will allude to these biodegradable resources. So we've used ArcGIS and geospatial models, as well as relooking at some of the ethnographic research in order to address that. And we have done this through largely in a field school model, and that has allowed us not only to train a substantial amount of native and non-native graduate students and undergraduate students in an indigenous archaeology method, but also to ensure that they realize that we are dealing with living people, regardless of them not having recognition by the federal government. And that has that way we're assured that if they do go into cultural resource management or whatever they do, that they will look for the living people within that territory that they're working in. And we have, so we've applied for more funding, though, outside of the field school in order to continue to pursue these and synthesize our field research findings into a publication. So that's sort of our future goal in sort of having the opportunity to do all this work. Another project that I wanted to talk about briefly is called Mapping in Indigenous Los Angeles, and I have been doing this with a number of faculty here at UCLA, Maylee Blackwell in Chicano Studies and Gender Studies, who is Cherokee, and Mishana Goman, who is Palawana Seneca, and Keith Camacho, who is Chamorro, in looking at the using digital storytelling in a geospatial framework as told by community leaders, youth, and elders from indigenous communities throughout the city to highlight a very multi-layered knowledge system and history. So of prime importance is that the formation of Los Angeles diminished, first and foremost, the Tongva community and their thousands of years of history. And most people here, if you ask them, will not know, of these 5 million people that live here, will not know who the Tongva are, let alone that there are the largest native communities, indigenous communities in the U.S. here. So we wanted to take these often too hidden histories and stories of survivorship and bring them forward within this digital storytelling format. And of course, we have very lofty goals of what we wanted technology to do. We really wanted an app that would allow people to go around and take photos and tell video stories and then upload them directly. Basically walk people through what they would have as their sort of walking tour of their neighborhood or their area. So, and this was really to address the Mixtec, the Zapotec immigrations, the Mayan immigrations, and so many other Chamorro and the Pacific Islanders. So many different histories here that are really important but have been lost in this very dominant narrative, Western narrative about Spain coming in and then the U.S., Mexico and then the U.S. So we really want to disengage that and using the digital media in order to even the playing field and also to give not only community members a chance to tell their story, but also be able to allow those resources to be accessed by educators within the Los Angeles and larger communities, as well as provide blogs that both students and community members and other indigenous people could add to in whatever way they'd like. So we're trying to keep it as open to the ways in which people would like to use them. So we just launched it literally a couple of months ago on Indigenous Peoples Day, and now we're uploading many maps, and we have about 20 that are in the pipeline, 5 of which are up, and we're really excited to keep adding to this and going forward. And then sort of lastly, I just wanted to let people know that Dorothy Lippert and I, along with many other people, have been working on a session to submit to the World Archaeological Congress perhaps tomorrow on that will be called Indigenous Experiences in Repatriation. And the idea is to situate dialogues about repatriation away from Western conventions and into Indigenous-led issues and discussions from across the globe. Too often within museums and institutions, repatriation is a job, and it's certainly been my job. But for Indigenous communities, it is about ancestors, cultural patrimony, and cultural heritage. What is often considered to be an accepted narrative within dominant society must be constantly proven and verified to and by outside members of the dominant society in order to gain control over their past. So by foregrounding these issues, perhaps dominant societies can learn, who attend this conference, to show more compassion and understanding, while hopefully inspire other communities in what they could do. And we're hoping to expand the dialogue again, not to knock NAGPRA, but I'm kind of tired of it after 17 years, and watching it for 25. So to get away from NAGPRA and to really talk about the economics around repatriation, identity issues, cultural recognition between the past and the present, things about protecting the dead, what's considered to be a war crime in many other places, and yet it's our research as well. Cultural and social norms and priorities within sovereign nations, and the role of science, and certainly the body as a sovereign, and the role of conservation and preservation, landscape and place, language, and so many other areas. So there's just so many other things to talk about. I don't want to defend. I don't want to. I'd like for us to move beyond the defense or accepting or trying to persuade, and really just sort of focus more on what is the reality for so many Indigenous communities and where they are. And certainly we'd like to make it a volume, because I think this kind of dialogue is lacking within the academic sphere, but also to think about things like a web channel. I love IPinCH's web channel on YouTube, and other sort of virtual exhibitions that would allow communities to not only access that information, but to engage them and allow them to participate. And that's all I have for you.
Well, I would say that that's a very great deal that you have for us. Thank you so much, Wendy. Comments or questions? I can't let all that go by without opening the floor, at least for a little while. There's a few, just so you know, Wendy, if you haven't been monitoring the comments, there's a few comments that just are exhorting you to greater things, and then one note that there's another session that you might be interested in, a comment from Claire that Audie Huber would be interested in talking with you about the Ancient Wonder Kennewick Man in your WAC session potentially.
Oh yeah, I have to say I love the WAC layout, and the idea that people outside of just your colleagues and friends and people that you can think off the top of your head can join sessions. I think it's such an amazing idea and works so well.
And I wanted to also thank you. Well, number one, I want to hear if there's any other comments from anybody else that's tuned in. Nobody else is coming forward, so I guess I'll just say thank you, Wendy, for also mentioning the IPinCH YouTube web channel that I've been spending some time with as well, and was going to be the topic of what I had to say. There's only a few minutes my presentation was next, and it's really a very simple presentation, which boils down to the fact that those internet resources exist there on the IPinCH YouTube channel, and are available for folks. Oh, we have nope, it's not an error message for us. I beg your pardon. Well, as long as you're here, would you bring up? Yeah. One of the challenges associated with using that, if you haven't visited it, you can either find the IPinCH videos through the IPinCH website or through YouTube with a simple search for IPinCH. And then there's a challenge that greets you in that many of these videos are quite long. And especially for me, I was looking at trying to transform them into teaching assets for both face-to-face and online course deliveries. And so one of the things that I did was also kind of in line with retraining myself by way of trying to acquire a new skill associated with video editing. And so this term I just decided I was going to learn a little bit more. And this is what I did, was condense Val Napoleon's presentation down to, let's just go back to the beginning. From, I think it was about 8 minutes or something like that, down to a minute and 35 seconds. So here's Val Napoleon in a minute and 35 seconds.
Legal pedagogies. Because Indigenous legal traditions need to be a part of Indigenous self-determination, rebuilding our citizenries, and form part of the basis for Indigenous peoples relating to each other and to state governments locally, nationally, and internationally. We need accessible and practical ways to substantively articulate, apply, and teach legal traditions. And it's about managing ourselves, it's about solving problems, and it's about managing internal and external conflicts. It means, to build on Hadley's presentation yesterday, moving from the abstract to asking what are the legal concepts and categories in the different legal traditions, what are the principles, what are the legitimate processes or procedures for collective decision making, and what are the ways that people reason through the issues. Arguably, if law is created by sustained and serious engagement, then a lack of serious and sustained engagement can cause law to lose its legality and its legitimacy, and that law can actually cease to exist.
So there we go. There's an unlimited capacity to learn additional technical skills associated with that type of editing work. I'm looking at Alexa, who possesses these kinds of skills, and a number of other IPinCH team members. But I guess my closing comment is just to invite others who are interested in transforming IPinCH content resources into teaching assets to reach out, and let's create a little network to try to find ways to put some of this incredible information to work. So that's it, and now we have Eric Simmons up and available for another live presentation. So Aaron, who's been doing a good job of keeping track of us technologically, is going to do the transition here. Thanks, Eric. Maybe the slides go along.
Just tap it.
Just touch it?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Hello, everyone. Great. So I'm fairly new to IPinCH. I'm also fairly new to being a grad school student and conducting my own research. And so when John encouraged me to speak here, I wasn't exactly sure what I'd speak about, but I thought what I'd do is maybe talk very briefly about what the experience of, initiating research in a context where IPinCH has been very influential, it has been like. So that's what I'm going to try and do here. I'm lucky to be working with George Nicholas on a project. I'm working off some of his work, dealing with the intersection between archaeology and traditional knowledge, roughly. My particular interest is in, the epistemological implications to archaeology of this kind of intersection. But I don't think one can do that kind of research, or certainly I'm not interested in doing that kind of research without also thinking about the various attendant social implications of that kind of research. And this is where I think I feel very well supported by all the work of IPinCH's past, and also maybe engaging in some kind of small way of extending some of IPinCH's concerns into the future. Oh, just a pen. Oh. They're just, oh.
Fingers.
I'm going backwards or forwards. Wow, sorry. I can't find my going backwards. I went too far. Help me, help me.
Okay.
All right, we're good.
Okay.
We're good.
Forward moving conversation.
You have to look back before you can look forward, don't you? All right. I thought I'd give you a bit of my own background before I went any further. George always encourages his students to take a biographical approach to understanding people's work. So here's my 5-second version, which is that I have a very varied background. I started in the fine arts. I moved on to work in politics, and then eventually was a farmer for a few years before coming to archaeology. And sorry? See, that's your artwork. Oh, yes, Aaron says to say that's my artwork. That's true. That is my art. So I came to archaeology with that background and coming to what I thought was a social science. And I guess at first was really taken aback by what felt like a discipline that was really preoccupied with the science part and not so much with the social part. And that was kind of it was confusing and a bit upsetting to me at first. I guess one of the residual questions coming out of that was, well, this is a discipline that's so fundamentally concerned about people of the past, where is our concern about the people of the present? Of course, a couple of years go by and I start to do more advanced courses and I start to learn that there are decades worth of many people, including many IPinCH members, who have been asking those kind of questions for quite a long time before I came along. And really talking about archaeology as it operates in a social context with all the things that go along with that, subjectivity and ethical implications as well. So my own research so far, I'm shorthanding as working on an anthropology of archaeologists, and what that really means is just I'm interviewing archaeologists from around BC, talking to them about the ways that they are incorporating traditional knowledge into their own practice or working with traditional knowledge holders, and trying to access as wide a variety of experiences as I can. And my own interests, and these are reflected in the way I'm doing the interviews, are multifaceted. I'm interested, as I said, in epistemology, also in issues of methodology, and also some of the pragmatic disciplinary constraints that makes working with traditional knowledge difficult. But what's been most interesting, I think, is this one set of questions that I'm finding that respondents are really giving me kind of really various and fairly impassioned responses to. And these are questions. Well, I'll show you the questions. They fall into sort of three categories: issues of knowledge ownership, how knowledge sharing protocols affect how traditional knowledge is used by researchers; power dynamics, how imbalances of power between archaeologists and First Nations affect knowledge sharing and knowledge sharing outcomes; and reciprocation, the kinds of ways archaeology gives back or doesn't to those who choose to share their traditional knowledge with archaeologists. And so, I'm only in the beginning of my research. I haven't spoken to enough archaeologists to say anything about BC in general, but I have noticed a few trends, and one of them is that these questions are really eliciting really interesting responses, and I think it's fair to call all of these questions, at least partially, issues about IP. My experience as archaeologists, whether they're working in the academic sphere or in the professional sphere, are excited and feel it necessary to have these conversations about the social implications of what they're doing. I think they're also becoming aware that there is an increasing incorporation of traditional knowledge into archaeology in BC in general. And with those new research opportunities comes new challenges, a lot of which are socio-political and the implications of doing that kind of archaeology. It's complicated terrain, and I think that complicated terrain is exactly why myself, and I think many others, I'm sure many others, are so grateful for the work that IPinCH has been doing to give us some kind of roadmap or examples of how to go forward with those kinds of concerns. Exploring and articulating ideas about research, how it should be done properly, how effective and ethical research can only be done when the concerns of living communities are taken into account or collaboration is sought. So I guess my parting thought really is just that for me, as a very early researcher, IPinCH stands both as a practical and a symbolic, support, for lack of a better word. I've used the knowledge base to draw upon resources that have been produced by IPinCH in order to help articulate my own concerns and hopefully ask the right questions of the archaeologists I'm speaking to. But it's also symbolically just knowing that there's this large, diverse, high-caliber people who have come together voluntarily to take on these issues and to think about what ethics really means in the context of research, or what real collaboration looks like. Knowing that that's happening, and that now I'm a very small part of that, it encourages me to continue in that direction. And I think I think this experience of talking, whether it was with peers during research design or later to the archaeologists in the field I'm speaking to, the fact that it's as easy as it is to center conversations around issues about living communities and intellectual property says a lot about, I think, the way that the landscape of archaeology has changed over the last couple of decades, and I think IPinCH has played a big role in that and will continue to. That's what I want to say, I guess. So I'm grateful that I will be able to chance to continue to work with IPinCH members and also continue to hopefully extend some of the themes of IPinCH's concerns. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Stay put just in case anybody chimes in with, stay put, Eric, just in case anybody chimes in. Let's make that quick. Any comments or questions for Eric?
Let's click again.
And keep on clicking.
Here, no, just go shortcut. Ooh, we've got 3 new comments.
Excellent.
John?
Yes.
John, this is Bonnie. Would it be possible to shift the camera in the classroom a bit? It's cutting out people. Oh, okay.
Wow. I had no idea what you all were seeing. I did ask that question a while back, but we weren't able to get it resolved. We have a couple of comments. Oh, there we go. It's pretty much the same thing.
Much better, thank you.
Terrific. Sorry that took, 2 hours and 40 minutes. Not bad. Oh, we did something to it? Oh,
It wasn't always that way.
Oh, good. Yeah, we figured some way to screw stuff up. Good. Thank you, John. The man behind the curtain there, John. Yeah. I think you might be off the hook, unless there's any. Wait. Oh, Sarah has a. Come on down here, Sarah. We won't be able to hear you. It's just as easy. That way, it gives a chance to see some other people who are in the room with us here. So here's Sarah. Listen.
Eric, thank you for the presentation. I'm excited to see that you're starting to get some groundwork done with the interviews. You said that you found that a lot of the issues you're talking about boil down to IP issues. And I was wondering if this is something that's perceived by the people you're interviewing, or are these connections that you're starting to make as you're getting answers, and do you hope to project that back to the people that you're talking to?
Yeah, no, I think what I was really trying to say is that the IP or the social implication part of the questionnaire is one component. I speak about epistemology, I speak about other components. Just that's the component that seems to be engendering the most varied and often the most impassioned responses. In fact, I'm usually having those conversations before I get to that set of questions, because people they want to, they're jumping the gun. They want to talk about those issues because they understand that the social implication stuff is connected to all the other kinds of work they're doing, and so that we end up talking about those kind of things before I even get to my set of questions. So I think it's really just more an acknowledgement that I think this is already on people's minds, and realizing that this is bound, the ethics and research ethics and collaboration is already bound up in everything else they're doing.
So it's a framework that people are already operating within, even if it's subconscious.
Right.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys. Sven, are you available? You're with us? There he is.
Yep,
fantastic. Take over. You've relocated, Sven, to some beautiful sunny porch or something.
Yes, I've gone outside. So it's morning here. It's about time to take the kids off to school almost. Apparently you've got to do that. So can you see me? Yep, that's all right.
I don't know. I actually don't know the answer to that question. Somebody else out there in webinar land has to tell me, because all I do is see myself right now. Okay, yes, we see your slides now.
Perfect. All right, thank you, everyone. George took care of protocol that side, and I'd just like from this side to do the same, to acknowledge that I'm on Noongar Whadjuk land. There's an interesting question that's arisen as to who owns the sort of technologies of transmission between here and there, but that's maybe a story for another day. What I'd like to do today is be brief and sort of semi-hopeful at least. What I'm interested in is images and their nation-building potential, but these also come at a certain cost. And I have a single slide to illustrate this point. I'm speaking from a sort of perspective of the global south, if you like, where some of our issues and priorities are perhaps a little bit different from the global north, certainly in parallel, but significantly different as well. The images you have on the left-hand side is South Africa's post-apartheid coat of arms, post-94, and I draw your attention to the two human figures in the middle of that coat of arms. These are drawn from a San or Bushman rock painting. And then on the right, I've got the slide I didn't want. Never mind. There's Senior Kimberley traditional owner, Donnie Willagudja, and there's the Wanjana tradition of what we call rock art up there. But framing this is the sort of feral nature of images. We struggle in words to capture what these things really are. And in many indigenous understandings, they're not things at all, but they're living, they're beings, they're sentient, they're something else with which people share and constitute their lives. So I'll talk about the one on the left first. The San or Bushman, both of those terms are exonyms. They're not terms people use for themselves, but they don't have a term for all San or Bushmen collectively. That's a very particular body politic constructed in the West. But this is a deeply disenfranchised indigenous community. The word indigenous in most African contexts tracks very differently to other places in the world, in that most countries in Africa, there are 53 countries, or depending how you count, most of them have indigenous majorities, but they have also at the same time indigenous minorities. And the San are one of these indigenous minorities. They exist in several countries, about 120,000 people across southern Africa, and are possibly most well known for their very beautiful symbolic and spiritual rock art that relates to various encounters they have with the spirit world, with this world, and so on. This is a double-edged sword because it's very beautiful, admired by people all over, used, appropriated, misappropriated, and Solon's appropriation booklet is an excellent one, and I draw everyone's attention to it. So it's certainly in people's minds, but it, at the same time also serves to place the San in a sort of Stone Age past, if you like. Sorry, it's getting quite noisy out here, so I'm just going to move outside. Someone's cutting the lawn. Alrighty, so and what happened post-94? The old coat of arms had an ox wagon in, the symbol of European invasion, if you like. So unsurprisingly, that was changed. And the discussion that went on is people said, well, what icon can we use that won't offend anyone or won't be particular to any one group? We can't use that ox wagon, we can't use a Zulu shield or anything like that. And people then said, well, what about rock art? That's part of a common heritage. Let's put it in. And to cut a long story short, the two images you find there are abstracted from a chunk of rock that was cut out of a rock shelter in 1916 and brought to South African Museum, where I used to be the curator. And it was then remodeled. The original figures, for example, were clearly male and mirror imaged in an attitude of greeting. And over the last sort of almost 20 years now, the various San I've encountered, it's been quite a number of them, always say two things about this coat of arms, bearing in mind that a coat of arms is the highest symbol of state. It's more important than the flag because it carries the endorsement of the head of state in most cases. So the San would say, number one, we're very pleased that this image from our past now contributes towards nation building in such in a landscape in which there was such discrimination in the past. But number two, why didn't anyone ask us to do this? And so there was this notion this is a common heritage that you can use. Certainly if you're obeying copyright law and so forth, you're in no kind of breach. We don't know who the authors were, and they certainly have been not with us for quite a long time. But it rather ignores the specific authored nature of these. So there's a hopeful moment in terms of nation building, but there's a cost in the radical abstraction of a symbolic and religious symbol into modern-day political symbol. Moving along to the image on the right, in the background you can see a sculpture, a derivative of a Wandjina figure. This is from Northern Australia, from the Kimberley region. And in the Wandjina Wungur belt, the Wororan peoples know, not believe, we can't use that word, believe, they know that Wandjina are one of the creator beings, a very powerful co-inhabitant of the world with people. There are certain people, such as Donny Wulaguja, seen there on the left, who are authorized to renew and to paint Wandjina as part of a renewal cycle. And many of you will remember the late 80s debate about repainting ancient rock art and the rights and wrongs of that, for example. Now, Donny is the man who, for the Sydney Olympic Games, did the Namarali Wandjina that was seen by several 100 million people, and which did a great deal, I think, to rehabilitate the image of Australia as a very colonial country. So on the one side, we have the San, who are a disenfranchised minority. On the other side, we have Aboriginal Australians who account for, again, depending how you count, 2 to 4% of the roughly 26 million people in Australia, and so are a radically marginalised Indigenous group. So much so that many Kimberley people are withdrawing from national politics, that the Kimberley is a big place in terms of land mass, small place in terms of people, maybe 30,000 people. And they're saying, well, we've always had government, we've always had law, and that's what we'll stick with. That white fella law out there, well, that can carry on, but we're not very interested in it, because in this case, what you had in the slide is a very well-intentioned sculpture inspired by Wandjina that was commissioned in the eastern part of Australia. But because the person making the sculpture was not authorized to do so, and because Wandjina, in almost all cases, other than exceptions like the Sydney Olympics, should be made on country in a very circumscribed landscape where it is known to belong, this causes great offence. Similarly, not many years ago here in Perth, a graffiti artist started painting Wandjina images all over town in a very well-intentioned strategy to make the graffiti locally relevant. And there was an Indigenous film by a Badi Jawan woman on this, in which she too was conflicted. She said she gets what the guy is trying to do, but he hasn't quite done it in the right way. So in both cases, we have quite powerful images. This presentation was titled the Afterlife and Aftermath of Images. Once these things we call images get out there, it's very difficult to control how they're used and so forth. So I suppose to conclude, the take-home message is there are quite a number of costs in a nation-building project. In a very real sense, it's not about making everyone happy. Maybe at best we can make everyone equally unhappy. So we need to think about the fact that Indigenous legal systems, Western legal systems and practices, neither of those are fully equipped to deal with the world as it is now and it will be tomorrow. So, and I think this is very much the IPinCH project is to bring those two things, to reduce them to a binary for a moment, into the sustained conversation as has been done, so that we can get to that sort of third way I think that we all want to get to. And I think on that note, I'll end. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Sven. Thank you very much. If there's a quick comment or question, then we can entertain it. Otherwise, we will move on, because I see we have slipped a little in the schedule, and I'm cognizant that it's people, especially people on the East Coast, it's starting to get a little past the dusk time. So if there's a quick comment or question, then we'll hear it. Otherwise, Dave Stephenson is up next. Dave, chime in, I guess. I don't think there's going to be any other comments. So.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. My last name is Stevenson, John. I thought you knew that. It's not Stephenson.
I'm sorry.
I get confused with a polar explorer with the last name of Stephenson sometimes, that sometimes creates some issues. As you know, John, from having seen the outline of what I'm going to be talking about, I really am approaching this, I think, a bit differently from most of the presenters, which is that I'm looking at it really in some ways differently, in some ways the same, but I'm looking at a big picture, and I'm looking at a broad picture. I'm looking at a really large generational picture of IPinCH. And I want to first say that I appreciate Sven's recognition of the land upon which he gave his presentation, and I want to recognize the original inhabitants of the land in which I'm giving this presentation, which goes back really to some peoples that we haven't really completely identified yet, but within the last several hundred years, we've identified them as Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute peoples who still have left many, many vestiges of their very rich heritage throughout every step of the way that I walk as I walk around this landscape in this what is now known as the state of Colorado in the United States of America, North America. Let me just say that I have found, as an anthropologist, the broad view I have witnessed of IPinCH has been inspiring, and it's been rewarding for me. I was involved in intellectual property issues before I got involved for Indigenous peoples, long before I got involved with IPinCH, and I've been sort of watching and witnessing IPinCH's tremendous fruition and growth since its inception. When it was at initially a bold, unformed vision by a small core of true believers, and as we've heard already this afternoon, that small core of true believers has expanded amazingly, and the projects that have been undertaken are really remarkable and noteworthy. And what's really important is that we have this network of ongoing activity which links a very rich cultural heritage of humanity throughout the world with some very challenging and exciting interest in that heritage by all of those who have participated in IPinCH and who have networked with people outside IPinCH to extend its network beyond where it is. And so that I just want to just comment on that and to recognize it. I have been fascinated, not just by working with IPinCH as I have primarily through the Tourism Working Group and some papers that I presented with other IPinCH members, the Stolo People of River Conference in 2013, the Society for Applied Anthropology Annual Conference in 2014, which has led to probable subsequent publications, additional work that I'll be engaged in the future, having to do with what's really hot right now throughout the whole world in the sustainable development arena and the role of indigenous peoples and cultural heritage in protecting this earth that we all share and have shared for many generations. This presentation this afternoon has been extraordinary, and it's an example of why IPinCH is really all the things I would say about IPinCH and what I was prepared to say about IPinCH is a real tribute to not only IPinCH's past, but to everyone who's participated in it, and I think all of the projects that are ongoing. Learning about, I could go right down the list of every presenter, and that's probably more the role of the commentator and the final words, Claire Smith and George Nicholas's role. But I have every presentation has really made a huge impact on me in ways that are important to the work that I've been engaged in for over 30 years. Some of you who have spoken already know what some of those impacts have been. And I've worked with indigenous peoples in many parts of the world and with in these kinds of projects. And the thing that kind of ties all of these things together, I think, is that the increasing recognition that we have to bring a different perspective, really a decolonizing perspective to what otherwise might have been robust research techniques and practices. We have to understand that what we do is part of a much integrated, much much more holistic and integrated world than the ivory tower that anthropology has been in the past. When we get outside the ivory tower and begin to engage in practical politics and practical legal issues, that, as Kathy Bell mentioned earlier, we begin having to understand that we need to re-educate that world and dialogue with that world. It's an ongoing dialectic with all the people that are part of IPinCH, with a much larger universe that is also emerging in very important ways, in really ways that, as I said, in the sustainable development area, if we go back and also look at global health issues, IPinCH has been involved in understanding the importance of what it means to figure out where we all came from with the most up-to-date scientific research. DNA sampling has incredible implications for modern science in the modern world, but it also has earth-shattering and potential meaning for the peoples who might be the subject of that sampling. And I'll be involved, I anticipate being involved in some of that work in the near future, and without IPinCH, that work would be much better, much more poorly informed, and much, I think, less valuable to the peoples that are most impacted by it. I just want to conclude very briefly by saying, no matter what my future holds, it's been a real treat to be involved with everyone in IPinCH. This afternoon session has been a wonderful tribute again to what IPinCH stands for and what it's accomplished. And I look forward to hopefully networking in the future and hopefully getting in touch with you on a one-to-one basis, many of you who have spoken this afternoon, to talk about some of the things that I would like to continue to be involved in, and that I think we all can benefit from, and certainly I could benefit from those projects, and hopefully it will be a dialogue and an ongoing lifelong enterprise that will have deep-seated meaning for future generations of archaeologists, anthropologists, lawyers, and most important of all, the peoples that are the most important part of IPinCH's project. That's it.
Thank you, Dave. Fantastic.
Oh, can't hear you.
I said thank you very much. Oh, wait, hold on. I had it muted just because we had some background noise here. Mostly people cheering and clapping during your presentation.
Oh. So. Well, I guess I was sort of not only the broad historical view of an anthropologist, but also the cheerleading role of a sports fan. Maybe I sometimes like to cheerlead also.
Well, that's just great. I don't know if anybody else has any comments. This is the time. So, if not, we will move right along to our next important speaker, Stephen Loring, somewhere on the West Coast in the Washington, D.C. area, I'm guessing. Stephen, are you there?
I am here. Can you see me or hear me?
We will momentarily. Just a second. Let's see how we do. How do we get Steve Loring up here? There you go. Hold on, Steve.
I'm hoping I have some slides.
There we go.
Do you have my picture there?
Just a sec, Steve. For some reason, we have your line feed is showing up as red. It's not coming in. Let's try again. That worked better. First time that's happened.
Hello?
Any luck?
No, not so far.
This is when Kate and Natasha are desperately needed.
I know it. And they both dropped off the call. I don't know if our tech guy is gone. Steve, have you activated your screen and your slides?
I thought I had. Let me try one other thing.
Because on our end,
share screen.
Yeah, that's what we want, is the shared screen, exactly.
All
there
right.
you go. Now it's loading up beautifully. You've got it. You're on. Go for it.
All right. Let's see what we do here. All right. That's. I'm sorry. There's no camera here, but I'm speaking from work, and the federal government, for some reason, maybe it has to do with Mr. Snowden, but we're not allowed to have Skype or visual presentations on our computer screens. So I'll just send that out and do with my moose impersonation. Which is hopefully the one that you have on your screen now.
It unmistakably true. That's exactly right.
Unmistakably. Excellent, excellent. Well, I wanted to just start. I'll be very brief. I don't have many prepared remarks, but I just wanted to have a shout out to George, who's the father of all this and quite an important person. And I'm reminded how much his book that he and Tom Andrews edited, at a Crossroads, Archaeology in Canada, in 1997, anticipated many of the themes and the directions that IPinCH has subsequently developed. And that work remains, I think, the most important archaeological publication in Canada. And I hope, since we're not allowed to talk about the past, but the future, I hope that the IPinCH initiative, which has grown from his early and continuous and impressive concern with these issues, continues to bear fruit, as I think it has. I was very fortunate to be part of a community initiative that grew out of an initial conversation with Natasha Lyons and her ongoing connection with Inuvialuit community members, the Inuvialuit region of northwestern Canada, Mackenzie Delta area. And I had known Natasha, and we talked about a number of things, but I brought it to her attention that the Smithsonian housed a really extraordinary collection of Inuvialuit material that had been collected by a somewhat bored Hudson's Bay Company factor in 1860 and sent back with boxes of bird skins and animal bones to the museum, where it had sort of lounged, more or less unexamined for 150 years. When George was initially thinking about sort of IPinCH projects, we had a conversation and we agreed and moved forward. So I think the Inuvialuit project, along with Bonnie Newsom's Penobscot work, was among the early experiments in the IPinCH initiative, or the IPinCH practical philosophy and practice. And IPinCH funding helped bring a really remarkable group of Inuvialuit elders, students, teachers, community leaders, seamstresses, hunters, along with media practitioners, television people, web people working with different media aspects, as well as museum anthropologists and archaeologists, to come together in Washington and spend a week exploring the collections, looking at the materials and learning from them. Being an archaeologist and a museum anthropologist, I profess to being somewhat of a craft materialist. We have these wonderful objects, but the phenomenon of the object is the degree to which it invokes stories and memories and situates the past very much in the present. And just a few pictures of some of the collections that we had to look at. The tangible results from this IPinCH initiative included a very prominent website, which was built in cooperation with the Inuvialuit Cultural Resource Center. And here a shout out to Kate and Natasha's just brilliant work. It's included conference participation and presentations and numerous publications. And while less tangible, but equally important, a broad appreciation for the roles that cultural heritage has in going forward, both in the museum, whenever we have visiting delegations like the Inuvialuit group, it really brings home to us the importance and the significance for caring and preserving and conserving these collections. But also, I think, for Indigenous community members, this very much, I think George or Martin Wopes talks regularly about putting the community in the driver's seat. And what was so refreshing about this whole project and its outcomes was not so much that another fascinating collection of old things saw the light of day, but how much it resonated with community goals and interests, both in replicating materials and learning about materials, but in using these old objects as a way to speak intergenerationally. And one of the success aspects of the program of our project, I think, has been this mixing of elders, community educators and leaders, and young people to just go through the generations of experiences and value and meaning that apply to these objects. There's a little bit of ongoing research. The project's never done, and we're moving a little bit to engage a discussion of the natural history specimens, the biological specimens that these Hudson's Bay Company factors sent back. So where the ethnographic material is exciting, we've worked a little bit with that, more work to be done. But we also have decided to delve into this really rich corpus of eggs and bones that the Hudson's Bay Company people sent back to the museum. And so here again, we have these very captivating objects, and yet the stories that they tell, especially among community elders, community hunters, people that are out on the land, is their experiences with the environment, with the animals that live out there, and the consequences, too, of environmental changes, of cultural practices differing the way people related to these animals in the past, the way they relate to them now. So the collections continue to provide opportunities to explore ways of engaging both museum professionals and community representatives with ways of thinking about the land and thinking about the future. And I think that's about, well, I had one other last thought, which was that George and I were both speakers at the Chakmul Conference on Indigenous Archaeology, which was in 1999. And I asked then, and I ask now, should Indigenous archaeology or Indigenous museum studies, well, call it what you want, be defined by Western concepts and scientific notions as practiced by Northern Native peoples or community members, or should it be something different? Now, of course, it can be both, but I think what's happened in the generation of IPinCH scholarship is it's clear that those are both trajectories of research that go forward. And it's just, you know, I'm here in Washington, D.C., and we just, you know, the most recent monument to go up on the Mall was to Martin Luther King. And I'm struck by his the passage from his his March on Washington speech about the arc of the moral universe being long but bending towards justice. And I just think that the arc, thinking of the future now, because that's what George told us we're supposed to think about, that the arc of IPinCH's moral universe is hopefully also a long one and bending resolutely towards a future of the past that is inspirational as well as transformational, because the way the world's going, Lord knows we need to listen to somebody else. So I'll leave it at that.
Is that, Stephen, is that somebody cleaning your ears so you can listen a little bit better?
No, that's learning how to listen as opposed to pontificate at great length, as is my wont sometimes.
Awesome concluding sentiment and incredible concluding image. Thank you very much, Stephen. Just great. Well, I think what we'll do is move along to Claire. Claire Smith is here, we know, from occasional chiming in. And so, Claire, if you'll jump in and take over, we will listen to what you have to say. Here she comes. Thank you, Stephen.
No, thank you. And thank George. And thank everybody.
Yeah, Claire, we're waiting. Oh, I'll try to unmute, and then maybe you can also unmute on your end.
How about that?
That's ideal. Fantastic.
Perfect. Good. So you guys can hear now?
We can hear you. We can see you and Jacko. We are ready.
That's great. And the dog, of which we have many. So I've unmuted it because we're listening now. So what we're doing is interesting, not just to what we do, to us as scholars, and Jacko's a scholar as well, but I think it's interesting, really interesting and really useful to the wider world. So what I've done is I've tried to work it out under three headings. What's ongoing, what can we do, and then some questions. So I just want to go through my points of what I can see is ongoing. What we're thinking of, these are the things that are still, there's obviously ongoing research projects. So that's happening. And I'm thinking, the Think Before You Appropriate, the blog, the Misappropriation Hotline, that really appealed to me. The Traditional Knowledge Database, KB, these things are ongoing, or should be ongoing. KB needs to be sorted, but I'm sure something will happen. The revision of the SAA Code of Ethics, those guys are doing an incredible job, something that I just really thought could not be done. But maybe there's generational change in there, and maybe we're part of that. We are part of it. And then, of course, what happens after that? The SAA Codes of Ethics aren't the only ones that need to be rethought. There's new projects. There's the Learning NAGPRA project from Indiana University, Chelsea's McLock's repatriation project. There's a whole lot of new projects that people have talked about. So it's not like, I kind of worried a bit that this was going to be IPinCH, we had a great time, party's over, sorry guys, see you around. And it's not like that. So that was really comforting for me. There's the Penobscot project, the Scowich project. These ones that are actually community driven are very, very strong projects. So, they are really an embodiment of the values of IPinCH, I think. The traditional research protocols, such as, the traditional knowledge label, that just blew me away, that presentation. That was just so well done, so clever, so thoughtful. I think a lot of the projects that people have done will inspire other projects. So I think there's an ongoing intellectual tradition, which I think IPinCH has garnered all this energy and intellectual something, and that's not gone. There's a momentum there, and there's a tradition it's somehow established. It's pulled together a whole lot of different people working on different things into a cohesive framework. So the mapping Indigenous Los Angeles, you could take that to every city, you know, that's great, you know. There's some great projects by some great graduate students, clearly, you know, Aman's project and you know, a lot of, you know, all the graduate students that presented there, so some of those people, many of them, will become teachers and they'll produce their own legacy. So this is kind of the beginning of their journey, and I find that very, you know, encouraging. The websites, we know there's a problem with keeping them going, but the websites are ongoing, the publications are ongoing, the greater appreciation of the issues, all those things are ongoing. What can we do? Well, I've written down some things which are just practical things that I thought, okay, what could I be involved in, what could someone else be involved in? I think helping the traditional knowledge database, you know, I think Aman was calling for help from field researchers to develop that, and I think people who have that knowledge can maybe work with communities, who are working with communities might be able to develop that in some way and help with that. We can certainly continue to develop the case that needs to be done. We need the transforming IPinCH resources into teaching materials. John, that's, you know, that needs to be done, and that's a really big legacy, big thing to continue. Looking at the other codes of ethics, not just the SAA. Continuing the conversation. So a couple of people have talked about going to WAC 8 in Kyoto next year, and I'd like to encourage people to do that because the call for sessions is still open for another couple of weeks, I think. And there's support for Indigenous people to go, and that is one of the few venues where you can actually say, I have some Indigenous people, or you are an Indigenous person, and you can get some financial support from the organisation. And I think I met with Koji last week, and I think the kind of basic support will be accommodation, registration, and $500 towards the airfare is how I'm thinking that it seems to be working out. I think IPinCH is a roadmap, and Eric Simons talked about that, and he talked about the practical and symbolic support. That's ongoing. Insofar as transformational, I think that might have been said, but I'm not sure. No, I just wrote it down, but that's ongoing. The value of collaboration, I think the webinar really teaches that, about the easy collaboration. And in a way, it's the way of the world, that a technology that's available now, as opposed to the technology that was available 7 years ago, is very, very different and great. So the questions, what are the questions? Well, one of them is the technology question. So people talk about, and David Stevenson talked about the webinar as extraordinary, and it is. But how do we use technologies to, one person said, level the flat playing field, and other people have talked about technological marginalisation. And I think that really is something, there's a project in there for a student, there's a project for someone in there. Certainly in Australia, mobile phones are what Indigenous people use, Facebook is what they use. No one can afford a computer, but everyone has a mobile phone. And they all have Facebook. So that's how people communicate during the day when they're away. There's obviously ongoing things like the web channel for IPinCH, blogs, websites and so on. How do we deal with the conflicts of even intentional work, the contradictions of the work that we do? And Sven Usman talked about that really clearly, and really good example of, what's very, very difficult terrain here in Australia for, as he said in the chat, people here aren't necessarily, they are in some places, but in some places there's a lot of competing Indigenous interests. Who do you talk to? How do you deal with those conflicts? So that's their ongoing question. Is it that IPinCH or IPinCH people we still need to be looking at? Who will continue to monitor the cultural appropriation? So there's a couple of projects on that, but I think that's a really important issue. And Some of the stuff that Bonnie's done has been like exemplary as an example of how to do it well. But there's also, there's the fantastic stuff, and then there's the horrible stuff, and we've got both ends of the spectrum in this. Finally, how do we maintain the momentum? So, I would like, I don't know, we've got some tools, but maybe an email group that's just simple, so you can just email everybody easily. An email listserv, that works for me anyway, because I check my emails, whereas I'm not as diligent in checking websites. And what are the future directions? I'm trying to think of, obviously there's a lot of things that will continue, but it seems to me that what we need to do more of. And I think Stephen talked about environmental changes and responses to that, and Indigenous responses to that, and I think that's interesting, and that's something that will obviously have to be a future direction. Health and well-being, people talked about that. I think Duncan might have talked about that, and David. And sustainable development is obviously something that's going to be ongoing, because development is something that people have to deal with throughout the world. And really, I think my final comment is really the value of collaboration. And the webinar is the example. So I think, even when Duncan was talking about boundaries, and lots of different people had ideas and could say, oh, well, look at this, think of that, So that value of collaboration is really the thing that's come out of IPinCH, as well as this phenomenal. You think of what was there 7 years ago, what we have now, and then think 7 years hence. Thank you. Thank you to everyone. I enjoyed all the presentations, and I found the student presentations, and I've forgotten the name. No, I do know her name. The girl student earlier on, and her name was Chelsea.
Chelsea.
Yes.
She's still here. She's still here, Claire, and you've got further opportunity to get her to blush.
I really enjoyed Jules. I really enjoyed Eric's. I really enjoyed Aman's, and they were really encouraging. Thank you all.
I agree 100%. Thank you, Claire. Excellent. So the last presentation goes to the person who had the first word on this. So it's George. It looks like you're getting ready to present your dog to George as a commemorative gift for IPinCH somehow.
Hey, Jacko. What a remarkable day. I'm just so thrilled and so, humbled by, the ideas, the energy, the excitement from all of you, and of course from many who are not here. In the IPinCH language, there is no word for goodbye. The phrase instead is, what's next? And I think this afternoon really points in some of the directions as to what's next and where we're going. The topics that came out today are just a sample of what's out there, what folks are working on. And these are issues, as you've been hearing about, in terms of repatriation and consent and ethics policies, teaching resources, information sharing, information ownership, what's going on with DNA research and its outcomes, and much, much more, including a lot of things we haven't talked about, such as 3D scanning and printing, and that whole revolution that's going to raise a number of very challenging issues. But also implicit or explicit in some of the comments are learning to listen, which is so very important, as well as learning to think outside the Western heritage box. And we have really been trying to work in all of those directions. And all of these themes that I mentioned and more are all part of this intersection of the four realms of action and engagement that IPinCH has from the very start, of theory, practice, policy, and ethics. And all of those really weave together, hopefully in everything we do, or at least in one or a combination of the various projects that you've been hearing about. Today has been an opportunity to share ideas, to share excitement as to what's next. And we're now at a point, too, where certainly we want this conversation to continue. We're going to be shortly making an announcement as to the post-IPinCH network platform that we're just trying to get the wrinkles out of. But this is certainly a time for new visions, for new blood, for new ideas. And in thinking about this reminds me of something that Sydney Martin mentioned at our midterm meeting in 2011, something that's really stuck by me. And that is, IPinCH is a living thing. It has a spirit. And when we look at IPinCH, it's us. It's not it. And IPinCH has continued to grow. It is a huge family. It's a huge living thing. And it's, think about our children and how they change over time, how they grow, how they mature, how they made, some errors along the way, but also some really good judgment. I think that's where we're at, that I can only look forward to seeing all of us grow, especially this new generation of scholars and young folks who are going to take this vision forward in new and exciting ways. And I'll just thank everyone again for this wonderful day. Thank you.